Our hero was sitting at his desk and pieces of paper were scattered in front of him. The young man had drawings in his hands, and someone asked if he liked to stand up for people and whether it was so. Addressing our hero, some guy put his foot on his desk and said that he would tell him the truth, that the one who put all this on his table was him. And since the young man loved to stand up for people so much, he had to see if anyone would stand up for him. The hooligan stood near our hero's table and tried to offend him. At that moment, while the young man was sitting over scraps of paper that were scattered all over the table, and recalled the scene when he went to the men's room, where he saw these three beating some guy and asked them to stop bullying them. The young man understood that because he stopped their bad behavior with this little boy, these guys now decided to come off on him. And this boy, who was protected by our hero, sat next to him and looked at a book. Looking at him, the young man understood that the young man was so worthless that he can't even make a sound himself. At this moment, while our hero was distracted, one of the hooligans, pushing him, said that he asked if the young man was pretending to be an idiot, to which he hit him back and asked him to go to hell, knocking out his teeth, and he was lying on the floor in front of him. Our hero was getting up from his desk looking ahead himself with an outstretched fist and said that he did not like people who threatened him. The next moment came to our hero from one of the three guys and then came from the next one, whom the young man hit. They all started fighting right in the classroom, and at that moment the rest of the students came in. After seeing the fight, one of them said that he had heard that before high school, this Jin Tian was the best student of the middle class, why he became involved in fights so often, and said that the young man was funny. The girl who was standing next to him tried to run up to the guys and said that they had to stop fighting and they had to let Jin Tian go. But the young man who spoke earlier stopped her, to which the girl tried to ask him to let go. Turning to Fabian, holding the girl by the hand, Fabian said that the young man was not good enough for her and asked her not to interfere in his affairs, to which she said that it was no longer Fabian's business, because the young man did not deserve it, and asked to let her go. Fabian thought to himself that what was good about this Jin Tian, Fabian would make sure that from tomorrow the young man did not come to school anymore. At that moment, his thoughts were interrupted by a teacher who burst into the classroom after opening the door and seeing what was happening, asked everyone to stop or he would immediately inform them all of this to their parents. The next moment, our hero, beaten with a black eye, was walking with his father, who was driving a bike next to him, and he asked the young man to stop giving him problems, to which our hero, looking at his watch, said that these guys started it themselves and they also broke his very watch. The father, looking at how the young man tried to fix his watch, said that there was nothing wrong with it. He would buy him a new one, because their business was finally getting better, the father said. And at that moment they were approaching the house, where a large crowd was crowding. Everyone was discussing that some kind of lawlessness was going on and that someone had destroyed Kim's father's store. So it was necessary to call the police as soon as possible. If you report this to the police, then Kim's house will be destroyed, one said. After seeing this, our hero and his father realized that someone was arranging a rout in their store, and then the young man ran forward, asked everyone to stop, asking what all the people in the crowd were doing. They were surprised that the young man ran forward. Our hero, trying to hit the opponent, began to get into a fight again, and then he was grabbed and also hit so that even the watch fell off the young man. Three men stood in front of him and the father tried to protect his son and asked not to touch him. And if they wanted to beat someone, they could beat him. One of the hooligans with a cigarette in his mouth, addressing our hero's father, told the uncle that he would not hit him, because he had not paid for the roof and now owed them. If they did not get the money tomorrow, they would destroy everything here, he said, stepping on our hero's watch. The father, holding the young man, understood that their affairs were bad, and our hero, asking, thought that this man who broke his watch was too bad a person. The next moment, the young man was already lying at home and looking at his watch, could not understand why there were so many bad people in this world. Why was it so? The father, sitting next to his son, said that food prolongs their lives and asked not to worry the young man, and tomorrow they will ask the neighbors to borrow money. And it's good that things had been going well lately. He thought they would be able to pay them. The father, trying to feed his son, gave him food, but he only threw it away, saying that it was all because his father was a weakling and asked him to leave his room, and he only exhaled and left his son alone. Sitting on the bed in complete darkness, our hero, clutching his head, did not understand why he had no strength, because he just wanted to protect his family and that was his only desire. And jumping out of bed, turning to the Lord, he said that if he existed, then he should have paid attention to them. Why only good people suffer? Our hero asked. And those who get away with it are freaks. What did God do? The young man said, addressing him as something terrible. At that very moment, lightning appeared from the sky and struck directly into the young man's house where he lived and into their store, Dumplings at Uncle Kim's. Lightning struck directly at our hero, paralyzing his entire body and also affected his watch, and he fell on the bed and lay sprawled in the pose of a star. Then something began to say that it was scanning the host, and the scan was successfully completed. The implanted clock memory program was launched. At that moment the whole room lit up with light, and our hero also shone with this very light. Waking up the next morning and rubbing his aching head, our hero thought that he had a long dream where he had a divine watch. But then our hero realized that this dream was real, because on his hand were the very watches he was looking at now. Then a system appeared in front of the young man and greeted his master, saying that from now on she would live with him, and even though he was not waterproof, but he did not discharge, and he also had protection from perverts. So he asked the young man to treat him well, because he did not want to activate the function self-healing. This function worked. If the young man breaks the clock, then they will be able to recover themselves. Our hero, seeing the screen in front of him, was at first very surprised, and then realized that the screen right in front of him was talking in the head of a young man, thinking to himself about what kind of protection from perverts the robot was talking about. At this moment, the robot, addressing our hero, said that his name was SB10. The young man could call his watch 10 and showed a map of the young man's features. In front of him was a map where Jin Tian's characteristics were written: his intelligence, physical strength, spirit, luck, and abilities. Looking at the system in front of him, where all his data was, the young man thought about why one value was so weak. Here only unusual abilities show 0. He asked the computer. The system thought that the fact that the intelligence of the endurance of the mind and luck of the owner surpasses others, and so you know. But unusual abilities belong to the part of people that is beyond the average person. For example, a young man can master martial arts very well, and some people can practice magic, said. A cloak of 10. The young man, referring to the system, said that he understood everything. For this you need to have some superpowers. Then the system said that the owner was smart, and then it would briefly explain all the information to him. While our hero was sitting and looking at his characteristics on the bed, Clock 10 said that he was here for the purpose of observing whether beings calling themselves humans could conduct rational or emotional research using their abilities, with which they should learn to reach the higher dimension from the lower one, where our hero now lives. So he will give the young man a little help based on his actions. That is, the computer wanted to follow our hero out of curiosity. The young man, listening to the computer, did not understand at all what he was talking about, to which the computer replied that this was first aid for the hero, if, as it is called, a beginner's kit, and a suitcase appeared on the young man's bed, which he was looking at. Then the young man realized that it was a real projection, and were modern technologies capable of such a thing, seeing a box in front of him that was standing and looking directly at him. Then the young man thought to himself, what was it? Looking at the hand where the clock was, when he was struck by lightning, and was it's all because of her? Pressing the briefcase in front of him, the young man tried to understand what it was, because the briefcase disappeared and there was a piece of paper in front of him. Opened the paper to the young man, they wrote that he would get +5 to the force if he put the book to his chest. Strength +5. Ordinary people have 5 points of strength, and it turns out that if the young man adds 5 more points, he will be twice as strong as ordinary people. He thought to himself and remembered that he had to offer a book in his chest. Was everyone making fun of him, and was there any other way to activate it? Holding a book in his hands, our hero thought, looking at her with his incredulous gaze. At that moment, the young man heard outside the window that someone was asking his uncle, asking if he had prepared the money, to which he replied that he did not have such money yet, and asked if he could give half to begin with. And opening the window, the guy realized that these were the same hooligans who came yesterday, and his father's store was trashed. One of them held his father by the hair and beating him, said that really the uncle did not want to pay. He only said that he had no money. The young man realized that yesterday his words upset his father, but he was not a weakling. As our hero said, he was just worried about his son, and recalled yesterday's scene. While our hero was sitting in his room, the hooligans were beating his father and trying to beat money out of him. The young man, leaving his room, realized that he could not sit idly by and do nothing. The next moment he saw the book he had left on the bed and thought about what was needed after all to put it to his chest. But also the young man thought that he seemed to have gone crazy to believe in it. The next moment, putting the book to his chest, the young man felt the energy that passed through him and went straight to the aid of his father, who continued to be beaten by hooligans. And then, running away with all his might, the young man hit the bully so that they went to hell, which they did not expect at all. His strength was so powerful that the hooligans flew into another wall opposite from where our hero was standing. The young man, dealing with the hooligans that were right in front of his father, could not believe in his strength, because he became even stronger. This booklet that he pressed to his chest really worked. At this moment his reasoning was interrupted by a hooligan who flew for our hero right with his fists. And the burden, responding to his blow and the fact that he wanted to kill him, was very strong. That the bully tried to ask the young man to let him go, because his arm was already broken, which he dealt with, and the next one said that the next time the bully would not handle him with one hand and hitting the bully on the floor. The young man turned around and looked the last one that's left. The last one that remained was the one with a cigarette, but no less important, as our hero believed. He just started to run away from the young man and said that this kid was really crazy, trying to escape from our hero. But he was catching up with the bully, laid him in the asphalt and said that if he saw this bully again on this street, then he will not be well, showing what will happen to him if he comes again, hitting the asphalt with his hand, which broke under his blow. Seeing this, hooligan, of course, understood everything, because he did not want the same thing to happen to him. The young man understood that although he was strong, but the impact on the asphalt was really very painful. But he thought to himself that it was necessary to endure, because Jin Tian's strength, his physical capabilities, are twice as much as a human. His striking force is 150 kilograms, like the strength of an ordinary boxer, and the strength there are twice as many bones as the average person. But even so, he was still not omnipotent and felt pain. The next moment, his data plate appeared in front of the hero, where it was shown that physical strength was increased. All other indicators remained within the same limits that the young man saw for the first time. One of the hooligans decided to get a knife and, rushing at the young man, asked how he dared to touch his brother and wished the young man a speedy death. To which our hero did not have time to turn around, as the father took something in his hands and, hitting the hooligan, told him not to hurt his son, because the father would protect him. And on the other hand, our hero added a fist to him, because he realized that the bully tried to hit him surreptitiously and asked him to get out. The next moment, all three hooligans bowed to our hero and his father and said that they were the three evils of South Street and swore that they would never again collect money for the roof of the Jin Tian family. Hearing this, the young man said that it was enough, and now they could get out. Beaten and shocked, they ran away go home, thanks to the young man that he did not kill them, and it was necessary to leave soon, saying goodbye to brother Tian. They said, running away and waving after the guy. Our hero only saw them off with his gaze, and the father standing next to him thought to himself that this child could change so much in one night, and where so much strength came from, especially if he did not eat. The father could not understand looking at his son. Then people started running up to them and saying that the son was so wonderful, and that it was necessary to take care of each other in the future. As they say, a distant relative is better than a near neighbor, and everyone approaching our hero and his father wanted to be together next to them. Looking at these hypocrites, our hero understood that when his family was mistreated, none of them came to help, and as soon as they defeated these hooligans, everyone immediately came to them. The young man, trying to get his father into the house, told him to cook him breakfast, because it was time for the young man to go to school. Sitting at the table, the young man rubbed his hand with which he hit the asphalt, and the father asked if the young man was injured when he was fighting, because there was no need to be so impulsive next time. He said that the son should be more careful, so he offered him to smear ointment on his hand. The father himself was also badly injured, but first of all I wanted to take care of my son. Then taking his hand, he began to process the guy's hand, to which he told his father that from now on no one would touch them anymore and he would protect him. To which his father said that dad did not want the young man to protect him. He just wanted everything to be all right with the young man. Hearing this, Jin Tian, he was very touched, and hugging his father asked for forgiveness for yesterday, because he did not want to call him a weakling. The father, seeing this surge of tenderness and hugging his son, said that everything was fine when he was his age. He also snapped and said that this was normal, and then added that the young man could be late if he did not hurry up. Running to school, the young man saw that the door was closed and that he was late. Then suddenly opening the door, a bucket of water fell right on him, which our hero looked at while it was poured out on him. Our hero, coming to school and opening the door, managed to dodge a bucket of water that fell right on him. Looking at all his classmates, asked who did it. The young man was very angry and looked into the classroom, Three hooligans who bullied our hero earlier said that one of them said it was Lai Kang and asked if the young men really wanted to hit him again. The two who were next to him just stood and looked at the guy. Then our hero, addressing Lai Kang, was about to go at him, but then ran into the classroom. The girl also told Jin Tian whether everything was fine with him, because someone was just trying to tease him. She already told not to listen to them and said she would go call the teacher so the young man could not be afraid. The young man, seeing the girl running in, thanked Jen, who always came to his aid, and thought to himself that he liked her only in the whole school. The girl entering the classroom with the teacher told Miss Chen that it was Lai Kang and his friends, pointing at the guy mocking their classmates. She saw a bucket of water that was lying on the floor and asked Lai Kang what he was trying to do. The young man sitting cross-legged and putting them on the desk said that he was. It is interesting that who did it. Intern Chen, was she really responsible for him? He addressed the girl, to which she, addressing her student, said that the interns were also teachers, why he bullied his classmates. The teacher stood next to the bully's desk and tried to reason with him, to which the bully replied to Miss Chen. He gave her one last chance not to interfere in his affairs, or just one word to his uncle and this girl will not be here. Then the girl thought to herself that the uncle of this bully is her supervisor, Zhu Shaokai. If she offends Lai Kang, her career will be over. But if she ignores these bullying, then what kind of teacher is she? And she did not understand how she could act looking at the young man that sat in front of her. Then Jin Tian arrived, saying about Miss Chen that everything was fine with him and asked not to worry about it and told her not to forget, because she would have her first trial lesson after the morning break. The three hooligans only laughed at the guy and showed obscene signs. Then, adjusting his sleeves, Jin Tian said that besides, it was better for students to solve their problems on their own, and understood that now he could deal with those who offended him. Passing into the classroom and seeing his desk, the young man did not understand where his textbook was. There was only a note on which it was written that if the young man was looking for his book, then she was in the toilet and sitting at the desk. Our hero decided to see who wrote it. Lai Kang, addressing Jin Tian, said that he forgot to write that his book was not only in the ordinary toilet, but in the women's toilet, and showed exactly where. Realizing that one of the hooligans had written this note to him, our hero crumpled the piece of paper and only looked at him because we were sitting in the classroom. The young man could not do anything else until the lesson was over. Jen, coming out to the blackboard, told everyone that all her classmates should pass their homework. She would take them to the teacher, to which Lai Kang said that some people could not even find their textbook, as he would hand over his homework and held a piece of paper in his hands with homework. Laughing, the young man was silent and did not answer him. At this moment, one of the classmates returned to our hero and handed him a piece of paper saying that he had been given this, and seeing Jin Tian's homework in front of him was very surprised that who could be so generous and gave him homework. Opening it, he saw a note. It was written on the note that he was useless and could not help to deal with these hooligans, but something he could do was to help the young man write his homework. He said that he copied his handwriting and so that he would not worry, so he thanked the young man for helping him yesterday. Turning around, our hero realized that it was the same kid he had saved and mentally thanked him for such a wonderful gesture. The lesson was over and everyone was leaving the classroom going home, and the hooligans were approaching our hero asking, didn't he say that he wanted the students to sort things out among themselves, and offered to go with them, because they would help find Jin Tian's book. He looked behind him folding homework, saw that they were the same hooligans who always offended him, led by Lai Kang, who always wanted to deal with him, and his two friends always stood behind him ready to help their friend at any moment. Then Jen came to the rescue, closing the young man and telling Lai Kang that what the hell was he doing, why he kept climbing up to the young man and trying to bully him. To which Jin Tian, addressing Jen, said that she should not worry, they just wanted to discuss something with him. Our hero thought to himself that he had not yet figured out how to take revenge on this bully, and he did not want to involve others in it. If he died, then only to him, our hero thought to himself. At that moment someone broke a pencil. Looking at this situation, this someone turned out to be Fabian, who could not understand how Ginseng dared to touch his Jen with his hands. And thinking about Jin Tian, it seemed that he did not understand the last lesson, the guy thought, looking at this whole situation and sitting at his desk. Jen watched our hero leave the classroom with the hooligans, and the girl realized to herself that the young man was too stubborn and she had to find a way to help him. The girl thought sadly, looking after the departing young man. Then a guy turned to her, telling Jen that where was she going, and blocking her way tried to stop the girl, to which she, addressing Fabian, asked to let her pass. Fabian, smiling and scratching his head from embarrassment, said that he had a question for the girl and could she help him. Fabian thought to herself that he didn't want that foundation to go to the teacher for this Jin Tian. He had to be beaten. he thought to himself, trying to detain the girl in the classroom. Our hero at this moment, they came to the women's toilet and escorting the girls out were left all alone, to which they did not understand at all why the guys went into the women's toilet. Lai Kang showed Jin Tian to pass and said that his textbook was somewhere here, to which the young man asked if he would help him find it and Lai Kang said that he would be happy to help him find it. Addressing his two friends, he told them to stand near the door and not let anyone into this toilet. The young man stood with his back to the bully and asked where his textbook was, to which he began to smile. And behind him a healthy guy who was his friend tried to put a bucket on our hero right on his head. But our hero, breaking the bucket, hit the guy right in the face that he collapsed on the floor and moaned from pain, touching your nose, which hit our hero. The young man, realizing that it wasn't painful for him, thought that it looked like the strength points he earned also increased the strength of bones. At this moment the young man looked at the bully, who was writhing in pain holding his nose. At that moment, Lai Kang grabbed some piece of wood and said that they had to play dirty. The piece of wood turned out to be a mop with which he wanted to hit our hero on the head. But it only broke on the young man's head and Lai Kang was very surprised. I don't understand how it could be. Then our hero, enraged, understood that today he would show Lai Kang who he was today. The young man would avenge all the students of the school that he had bullied. Holding Lai Kang right by the throat near the wall, and having previously hit him, the young man looked at the guy who was writhing in pain and said that his uncle was in charge here. If the young man beat him, he would tell him everything. Then our hero said that he would just kill the guy and decided to deal with him. Looking at all this, one of his guys, who had broken his nose before, our hero looked and realized that this guy was crazy, really crazy, and looking at him the young man was scared. The next moment, our hero, having dealt with one, was heading to another and the one who surprised him did not understand what would happen to him next. Then Jin Tian turned to the guy and told him to get them out of there, looking at him with his evil gaze, so that he immediately did what he wanted. Then looking at his friends, Zhang Shuang, running into the room, realized that there was something wrong with them. They were wrapped and twisted into rolls and beaten and called his friend, and when he saw them, he could not believe that the young man had done this to them. At this moment Fabian did not let Jen pass in any way. The girl did not understand what he wanted from her, to which the young man said that she was dreaming. He knew what the girl was going to do. What good did she find in this bad man named Jin Tian? The young man Jen asked, looking at her and standing next to her. Anger filled the young man, so he asked if he was not better than him, because he understood that now the guys are beating in the women's toilet. Jen heard this and was surprised by what the young man was saying. At that moment, someone grabbed Fabian by the shoulder and asked what the young man was better than him, and asked him to continue. It was Jin Tian who returned from the toilet. Fabian turned around and saw our hero and was surprised that the young man came unharmed. Jen was happy, and when she saw Jin Tian, she understood that the young man was fine, running up to him and looking at the guy. But the young man said that he was fine and thanked her for what she was worried about him. Fabian just looked annoyed at all this, to which Jen replied that she wasn't really worried and was very embarrassed saying this to the young man. The next moment the bell rang, and everyone was sitting down in their seats. So grabbing Jin Tian, she said that the lesson was beginning and it was necessary to return to their seats. So our hero went to his desk. Fabian, looking at the young man, did not understand how he returned unharmed, because he was thinking that the young man could beat Lai Kang and his friends, and where by the way the gang of three evils of South Street, which destroyed Jin Tian's store, had not heard anything from them lately, he thought. At that moment, a call rang in the messages on Fabian's phone, and it was the three evils of South Street. Seeing this, the young man decided to open his phone and see what kind of message had come to him from them. Then messages from the three evils of South Street were displayed on the phone, where they reported that his Jin Tian was crazy. He almost killed them and it was necessary not to contact him. No matter how much Fabian paid them, they would not be able to help them anymore. They said that life was more important to them. Seeing this, the young man did not understand what a bunch of cowards was in front of him, holding his phone in his hand, and was angry. The young man thought to himself, where did Lai Kang and the rest of the hooligans go? Why didn't they come to class and deal with Jin Tian? Really, they couldn't cope with him in any way. At that moment, the lesson began, and the teacher was standing in front of the class. Three beaten hooligans entered the classroom and asked if they could skip class today. One of them was holding Lai Kang and his friend, who were completely beaten. Seeing this, Fabian and the other students were madly surprised by what they saw. The teacher also looked at the guys in surprise and asked what happened to them and who they fought with, what they looked at her at, and the students in the class tried to understand what had happened. Everyone thought to himself that the three of them mocked everyone, and did someone really repay them? Jin Tian was so cool. He took revenge for everyone. These three got what they deserve, everyone thought, and Jin Tian became very strong. Yesterday they beat him up. Did the young man turn into masters of Kung Fu, who were able to deal with these hooligans? Looking at Jin Tian, the young man said that it was he who beat up his friends, to which he put down his textbook and said that he should have thought about his words again. Otherwise they would not be able to return home after school. Our hero said they only got scared and realized that it was necessary to be silent. Lai Kang said that they themselves fell and injured themselves, covering their friend's mouth so that he would not talk too much anymore. So they stood at the door and asked the teacher to go home, to which she said that she allowed it and asked Daiyong to take the guys to the hospital. Today they were released from lessons. Everyone cheered and said that Jin Tian was doing well and that it was wonderful. Jin Tian overthrew these three. Now the young man was their idol. All the students who had previously been offended by the guys looked at our hero and praised him. Only Fabian thought to himself that this was not all, thinking about Jin Tian and looking at him. While the hooligans were moving away from them, the young man asked his bro why he did not let him say that Jin Tian did it, to which Lai Kang said that then he would be expelled from school. But if he was expelled, how then? He had to take revenge on him, and there are many more ways to take revenge and he will show it. At that moment, they were walking through the schoolyard, trying to leave to heal their wounds. Then the young man asked what they should do now, turning to Li. Lai Kang, remembering the gang, said that first he had to treat the wound, and then go look for his cousin, because he was a serious gangster and would kill the guy with one blow, he said, rubbing his sore face. School time 17:20 and our hero went home looking at his watch. Someone was playing on the field, someone was leaving school, and everyone was going about their business. Then someone called out to our hero and asked if the young man was not going to study late today. The guy saw Zhen said that of course he did not see the point in messing with this, to which the girl said that studying late is a way of self-discipline. And the young man comes home anyway and sits down to play, she said. And if he does not get into the top 100, the young man will have to study at night. The girl addressed Jin Tian and lectured him. Our hero, waving her off with his hand and saying that how did it happen that this new class teacher was so annoying. He understood everything. Now he will study at home, and not play. And leaving the classroom he said goodbye to the girl. About himself, the guy did not understand what the point of studying was. Now he had to hurry home to play with his watch, and our hero ran down the corridor to get home as soon as possible. At this moment, his watch greeted his master, saying that today his level of learning is 0, so the level of superconvertibility is also 0. If the young man wanted to acquire more abilities, then he had to study well. Our hero was very surprised that the clock had just told him. Looking around, the young man thought about superconvertibility, because these are convertible points that could be exchanged for abilities. He understood, and the clock said that the young man was right. Then our hero understood that is. He said these points only depends on how much material the young man would study in a day. And it was right. For each acquired knowledge, the young man will get 1 point at his own expense, and if he has 50 points, then he will be able to acquire some kind of ability, the clock told him. Our hero, looking at them, said that of course, he understood this. It means that he cannot stop studying. The clock said that for beings of the lower world this is the only way to communicate with beings from the higher. So the owner needed to change his point of view and treat his studies correctly, the clock said. At that moment, our young man was walking his way home from school and thanked the clock for his explanation, because they are much clearer than all the instructions he has ever read, thanking him for such a compliment. Evening came. Uncle Kim's dumplings were closed, and our hero's father was taking tables and chairs from the courtyard so that no one would steal them. While he was doing this, he saw that the light was on in his son's room and thought that this boy was still sitting. And it was already so late he was still playing his video games. The father thought to himself that since his son's mother died, he had become a completely different person. The young man could not even study properly. Well, it was better for him to go and talk to him, he thought, because he could not let his past destroy his future. Removing chairs from the yard, thought about father himself. Going up to Jin Tian's door and knocking on the room. The father said that it was him, to which the young man said that it was not locked and the father could come in, and entering the room he saw our hero sitting at textbooks and studying. Seeing this, the father was very surprised that the young man was studying, and he only asked what had happened and why his father had come to him. Coming closer, the father saw that he was studying and that these were textbooks on his desk. Then Jin Tian told Dad that it was very rude. He was not an idiot. Did he really need to prove it to his father? Did he doubt him? The young man asked, distracted from his textbooks, to which he said that of course it was not so. Just the father was a little surprised and scratching his beard and as if a little shy of his son. He said because he was embarrassed that he did not believe in him at all. Then the young man, distracted from his studies, asked his father if he knew what else was very cool, to which the father asked what. The young man wanted to tell him that they knew very little about the world around them. The young man said, because he used to think that youth was needed in order to be a rebel, ignoramus to fight hard and love to anneal, the guy said. But now the young man said that he understood that real youth is when a person is looking for knowledge to innovate and help the world develop. Looking at the sky, the young man said. His father at that moment also watched his reaction, and seeing that it was a great job, the young man was continued to continue in the same spirit, encouraging his son. The father spoke. Leaving Jin Tian's room, he understood that something was wrong with his son. Why did he change dramatically? It would be necessary to go to a fortune teller, because he did not want his son to go crazy. Holding his father's head. At this moment, our hero, sitting over his textbooks, listened to his 1-0. He said that he wanted to remind him that if a young man perceives his powers as something normal, he will be disappointed, to which the young man said that he had just started studying and asked not to misunderstand him. Remembering his fights at school about everything, Jin Tian understood that after his mother's death, he stopped studying seriously. Once his mother wanted him to go to the big world to study for a brighter life, and not for the sake of his parents. The young man with tears in his eyes remembered his mother, and holding textbooks in his hands did not understand how he could forget her words, because he had to work hard for the sake of his future life, and she would not want the young man to fall into depression, for which, wiping his tears, the young man thanked his piece of 1-0. He did not understand, for which the young man thanked him. The guy asked not to pay attention to it and asked if Clock 10 could change his name, because it was very difficult to pronounce, to which he said that it did not matter, because it was just a code name. The young man could not believe that he treated it so lightly. It was night, and Lai Kang was sitting on the bench and waiting for his brother, thinking why he still hadn't come. The young man was wrapped in bandages, and then a jar flew into him. Jumping up from the bench faster, he was trying to figure out who was here, and his brother was in front of him surrounded by other bandits. Looking at his brother rewound and bruised all over, he asked who did this to him, unless there was someone at school who didn't care about his brother and his authority. Then Lai Kang, rushing to his brother, said that he had to avenge him. It was all his classmate Jin Tian, to which his brother replied that the young man fights well once he could beat him. Then, after the brother hugged his brother Lai Kang, he hugged his brother and asked how strong the young man was and whether he could defend himself from the knife. Taking the knife out of his pocket, the bully said and asked him to bring Jin Tian to the park behind the school tomorrow after school, and there he would kill him. Licking his knife, Lai Kang's brother spoke. Li, admiring his bloodthirsty brother, looking at him, said that everything was without problems. He would arrange everything and was very happy, but asked him not to kill anyone. In the end, if he uses a knife, then you can easily find a problem for yourself. To which the brother called his brother and told him to come up here. Approaching his brother, Lai Kang received a slap in the face from his brother, and he asked him to close his mouth, which the young man did not expect at all. The bully asked his brother if Jin Tian hit Lai Kang, then his brother would destroy him, and if he did not, then how could he manage this area? He asked Lai Kang and asked his brother if he understood, taking him by the breasts. The young man, looking at his brother intimidating him, said that he understood everything understood, and thought to himself that if something happened to Jin Tian, he would just say that he didn't know anything. The next day, with such tenacity, the young man will definitely cope with the last task, and asked again if he was going to return him to it, to which the teacher said that he did not want it anymore. Finally, the school was over. The lessons lasted so long. It was the students who discussed their studies and ran out of school. It was necessary to run faster to the internet cafe, because there were still places left, and they thought that they would get there first. Our hero, putting textbooks in his briefcase, understood that he would return home and study, and then he would have almost the right number of points. At that moment, the system showed that the superconvertible knowledge of the young man was equal to 13 points. At that moment, our hero was thinking that he thought he could earn 2 more points today, and later he will see what he could buy with them. The system told the owner that she recommended the young man to exchange 15 points not for abilities, but for an increase in health. Listening to her, our hero said that he just did not think so, to which the computer noted that stubbornness would not lead the young man to anything. But our hero replied that he wanted to see what happens to his decision. At this moment, Jen, looking at the young man who was leaving the classroom, tried to call Jin Tian, and he turned to Jen, asked if the girl wanted something from him, to which she, approaching the young man, was a little embarrassed and asked if they could go home together. Hearing this, our hero thought about that he had misheard now and was very surprised. At that moment, Fabian was listening outside the classroom door. Fabian thought to himself that the young man was a very bad person. What was going on in this Jen's head? What she found in this Jin Tian? Fabian could not accept this in any way and thought that since the young man was like this, he would pay for it by hitting the wall with his fist and watching Jin Tian leave with Jen along the corridor of the school. Fabian couldn't contain his anger and he could only watch them from the sidelines. Leaving the school together with Jen, they were heading towards the house, but then suddenly Lycan waved at him from around the corner, shouting the name of our hero and trying to attract his attention. Turning his head, the young man saw the bully and thought to himself, why was he here? To which Jen grabbed the young man by the sleeve. I asked Jin Tian not to pay attention to this bully and go. The young man asked the girl not to worry. He still had something to do, and removing the girl's hand from his shoulder walked on to Lycan. Jen, clutching her hand and being embarrassed, realized that the young man had touched her hand. It embarrassed her very much, but at the same time it made her very happy, and she just stood aside and watched what the young man had to do. At that moment, our hero approached Lycan, asking if he wanted the young man to beat him again, to which Lycan, leaning towards the hero, said that he was here to apologize. Jin Tian heard that he wanted to apologize to him. He said that he didn't need any apologies, as far as he knew. A guy like Lycan should have already filled out a complaint with his uncle to exclude our hero, Jin Tian said, addressing Lycan, who was standing right in front of him. Lycan said that he had prepared an apology ceremony for Jin Tian in the park behind the school. He would like the young man to come to see it. Smiling at our hero, he said. The bully thought to himself that he could not wait for the moment of Jin Tian's last breath and silently asked the young man to wait another minute, and he will see everything for himself. Jin Tian, looking at Lycan's face with a completely distrustful look, said that if he wanted to bring him an apology ceremony, then Jin Tian thought that if the young man really wanted to apologize so much, then he should have done it right here, and pointed his finger at the floor right in front of him, to which Lycan, taking under the arm of our hero and leading him to the side, he said that he could not do it right here, and said that this time he really wanted to apologize and tried to lead him along. While he was taking our hero away and waving his hand to Jen, he was saying that the girl should go and lend him Jin Tian for a while. Jen was just following them with her eyes. Our hero was thinking to himself that it looked like this guy had prepared a trap for him from behind the park, and he wanted to see what he can do it. Jen, looking in the direction of our hero, shouted to Jin Tian, well, so that he would not go along with Lycan, and tried to grab the young man by the jacket to stop him. To which our hero smiled only at the girl and said that everything was fine and asked her to go home faster. Especially at school he had few friends, and this was his chance to get closer to his classmates. The young man said, and showed with all his appearance that everything was fine. Jen, looking in surprise at the young man who was leaving with the bully, did not understand in any way, because this Lycan can't just change. She thought to herself she should have followed them, and therefore the girl decided that this was exactly what she would do when the two guys were moving away from her. Arriving at the gates of King Hishixi Park, Lycan offered to pass Jin Tian, pointing in a certain direction, and said that they had almost reached. Because there was only nothing left, Jin Tian silently walked with a young man who tried to hug him and talked to him very amicably. Leading Jin Tian deep into the park, the hero understood that it was getting closer and closer. It looks like this Lycan has some kind of plan, since he is taking him so far. When they were already in the thicket of the park, our hero, turning to Lycan, looked at him and asked where Lycan was trying to take him. He just smiled, and at that moment the shadows of other people appeared behind them, and the bully said not to worry, because they had already come and he was going to send him to the very inferno of hell. At this moment, he was pushing our hero into the thick of things, namely into the hands of hooligans who had bats in their hands, and they were ready to beat our hero. The young man certainly did not expect such a situation at all, and turning back he saw hooligans. The next moment, our hero ran away from them, and seeing 3 hooligans standing in front of him with bats, they said that the guy jumped back very quickly. Was he a monkey that could move so fast? To which the hero, looking at them, said that they tried to stab him in the back. Did they really try him to kill? At this moment our hero was throwing back his briefcase so that he would not interfere with him in battle. The bully, looking at the ground and pointing his finger at the young man, said that the young man was really smart, because they tried to kill him, and smiling looked at Jin Tian, said that if he did not kill the young man today, he would not be able to stay here anymore. Our hero stood and looked at the bully that stood straight in front of him, holding a bat in his hands. His friends were standing on the sides. They also had bats in their hands, and the bully's brother was trying to leave soon so as not to be involved in what was happening. The young man thought to himself that he had to get out, because if something happens, he will be the first suspect. At this moment, Lycan shouted to his cousin that he would stand guard and asked not to let the young man go. The cousin was of course pleased with the situation that was happening and picked up a stronger bat at this moment. His brother was leaving the scene, and his cousin and the rest of the hooligans began to attack Jin Tian, saying that in vain the young man contacted their family and it was necessary to get him what he deserved. At that moment the three of them flew to our hero together with the beaten ones. Jin Tian, dodging the blows and blocking them, tried to dodge the bits that were in the hands of the villains. One of the bits hit the young man right on the arm, and feeling this force, our hero was kneeling and realized that it hurt. Rubbing his hand, the young man thought to himself that even with the +10 strength bonus, it was difficult for him to fight against these scoundrels. Lycan's cousin, looking at Jin Tian, understood that this kid had hard bones, but he broke many of them and will break him today, the bully said, addressing our hero, smiling and going crazy looking at him. The young man, looking at his opponent, understood that he was strong, and the clock told the owner that he would like to start the exchange process. He needed only 10 points to acquire additional points to strength, to which the young man, dodging the bat that was flying in his direction again, said that he did not need to do this, turning to the clock. He said that it was necessary to leave it for later. At that moment, the cousin of the bully who was dealing with our hero was running away. It was the Lycan who sent the young man straight into the hands of the villains. And then running out of the park, Jin Tian met him, who also came to the park to follow our hero and make sure that everything was fine with him. Seeing Lycan, the girl was very surprised and asked why he was alone, and where Jin Tian was. The young man did not expect to see the girl here at all, because he thought she had gone home, and passing by her with a grimace, said that it was none of her business, to which the girl turned to the bully. She asked him to tell him what was wrong with Jin Tian or she would call the police. Grabbing the young man by the jacket, she said. Lycan understood that it was bad, looking at the girl who was behind him, and thought to himself that if the girl called the police, he would also have problems. So he thought that he would also take a ride with her, and maybe he had to go with her, which he decided to build from an innocent victim, and said that Jin Tian was surrounded by bandits and needed to go with him. He was going to help him, the young man said, and that it was too late to call the police. Listening to all this, Jin Tian was very surprised and said that she had to hurry. At that moment, our hero was dealing with the bandits and hitting one of them right in the jaw with his fist and flying off our hero. It was Lycan's cousin, wiping his face, saying that the kid was good and he really needed to admit it. Then turning to his two partners, he asked why those two were waiting and they were also attacking the young man. The partners heard this together with their cousin. The three of them ran at our hero, attacking the young man with bats and wishing him a speedy death. Jin Tian, dodging their battles, said that the hooligans were too slow to deal with him, and hitting cousin Lycan in the face again dealt with him and dodged other battles. The young man thought to himself that there was a strength +10, and it was very easy to dodge the attacks of an ordinary person. In the next moment, he hit two opponents who were standing next to him, right in the faces with his fists. Their bats fell to the ground, and the opponents were in Jin Tian's hands, and he said that if they moved again, he would wring their necks, because it was for them that the young man held the opponents, that they were on their knees right in front of him. Jin Tian and Lycan arrived just at the moment when our hero was holding opponents by the throat, and they were standing in front of him right on their knees. Seeing this, Jin Tian understood that the young man was fine, and Lycan carefully watched the reaction of the girl and thought what he should do next, looking at the picture what was unfolding right in front of him. At this moment, two hooligans asked the young man and even begged him to pity them, and begged him kneeling in front of the young man, and he held them by the throat and they had nothing else to do. To which our hero, addressing cousin Lycan, said that he should throw his pipe or now he would break these two necks, and therefore the hooligan there was nothing else to do but throw away his bat. Addressing the young man, he said that the guy fought well. He threw his bat and asked now to let his brothers go. Beaten and looking at our hero, the bully spoke, to which the young man replied that the guy was quite loyal. At that moment, Jin Tian ran to him, addressing Jin Tian and asking if everything was okay with the young man. And only our hero turned around, paying attention to the girl. At that moment the bully took out his knife that was in his back pocket of jeans, and having tried to attack our hero and addressing him, he said that if his boy did not look around, he would lose his life. At that moment the young man saw that the bully rushed to him attacking him with a knife and thought to himself that it really was the end, looking at the attack in front of him. At that moment, pink hair flashed past him and blood flowed. The young man was surprised and realized that it was Jin Tian who threw herself under the knife and protected him. The young man was surprised by the girl's act and shouted her name. At that moment Jin Tian was falling to the ground, and the knife was in her chest. Blood was flowing from the girl's mouth, and then seeing this, Jin Tian could not stand it and began to attack Lycan's cousin, throwing him several meters in front of him, hitting the young man right in the face, flying far into the bushes. He no longer stood up, and our hero, running up to the girl and dropping tears on the girl, tried to lift her up, holding her in his hands. The wounded Jen, who is in the hands of our hero, asked the young man to call the police as soon as possible. At that moment, two hooligans took advantage of the moment to take their bats and said that the young man was an idiot, and how he dared to touch their brother. So they wished him dead, and attacking the young man from behind, hit him with iron bats right in the head. The young man sat motionless and looked in their direction. The next moment, turning to the hooligans, the young man's face was burning and his eyes were mad. Seeing this reaction in the young man's face, the hooligans realized that this guy looked like a monster, because in their hands they were holding bats that were broken on the young man's head and crumpled. Looking at these bits, the hooligans were scared and throwing them ran into at the same moment, forgetting about his boss, whom our hero laid down. The young man, addressing Jen, held her in his arms and grabbing her ran through the forest, saying that she should hold on, because he would now take her to the hospital. At that moment, a clock appeared and told the owner that the girl had sharp stab wounds and a lot of internal injuries. If he continued to shake her like that, then she may not live to see the hospital, he said. Hearing this, our hero was surprised, because he did not realize it at all. Then the clock told the guy that now he had only one option left, to use his super convertibility points to get a medicine that would save the girl's life. And then the hero, turning to the system, asked how many points it would take to do this, and then the clock said that judging by the injuries of the young man, he would have to spend 12 points. Our hero understood that 12 points was too much, thinking to himself that Jen was the only one who took care of him at school. If his glasses would help, he was ready to sacrifice them, looking at the girl to be in his arms and bleeding, and understood that if she died, then he will not be able to forgive himself. And then our hero chose the exchange, because he wanted to save the girl who was always so kind to him. The clock said that they accepted this exchange and exchanged 12 super convertibility points for a pill healing injuries, and the young man had only 1 point left. The system told him the balance of super convertibility points was spinning right in front of our hero, and he had only to wait. The next moment he received the medicine, and already sitting on the ground and holding the girl in his hands, he gave the girl the medicine, saying that he would save her. Holding a small capsule in his hand, in the form of a ball, the young man understood that the girl was unconscious and that she would not be able to take the pill that he gave her, even though he tried to do it. But his efforts were in vain, and then the system said that it was necessary to pay attention to the fact that if the woman was not in a deep coma, then the young man could chew a pill and then put it in her mouth so she could swallow it. After hearing this, our hero was completely confused by this, because it was really necessary to chew a pill and then put it in his mouth. It was something new for him. But there was no time to be embarrassed, and the hero puts the pill in his mouth, decided that it was not as important as Jen's life, and therefore chewing the pill and apologizing to the girl. The young man said that he had to save her, and passing the pill from mouth to mouth, he tried to heal Jen. At this moment, the girl opening her eyes, she understood that Jin Tian was kissing her. The next moment, Jen woke up and sat on the ground. Then, jumping up from her seat, she saw that the young man was sitting next to her, leaning against a tree and a little embarrassed, trying not to look at the girl. After all that he had done, and humbly waited for her reaction, which she could give out after what he did, because he did not understand at all what reaction the girl could have, because when she woke up, there was only surprise on her face. When Jen woke up, looking at Jin Tian, she understood what he had just done and tried to ask him this question, but she could not say it completely. She just held her mouth and looked at the young man, blushing, to which he also blushed and asked Jen what was wrong, because he just hit this bully and he gave the girl a pill for a knife wound. Shaking her head from side to side, the girl said that it wasn't that at all, and being embarrassed couldn't say what she wanted. But then her thoughts were distracted by the fact that she was looking at her wound and realized that the wound was healed, and that it was very fast. How was it possible? She's thinking to herself and looking at her cut right on her chest from which blood was flowing earlier. Surprised by her earlier, she still looked at her, and then our hero, interrupting her surprise, tried to help the girl up and told her to get up, giving her a hand, because he would explain everything later, and said that he hit the guy on the head and had to go check if he was alive. So trying to lift the girl, they were heading in the direction where Lycan's cousin was lying, where our hero had thrown him. Approaching him, they saw that the bully was lying unconscious, and the young man looked at him and sitting on the bully gave him a slap in the face, saying that he woke up. After the slap, the bully woke up and looked at our hero jumping up and crawling away from him so that the young man did not touch him. The bully shouted that the guy was a demon and was afraid of our hero. The young man said that it was Lai Kang who sent him here to give him trouble. Was it so? The young man asked the bully and said that the two whom he called brothers and threw him and dumped him. Looking down at the bully, he was only kneeling, leaning on his hands. At that moment the hero stepped on one of his hands and the bully screamed in pain, to which our hero said that he would like the bully to remember today well and asked if the bully understood him. Looking down at him, Tom had no choice but to say that brother Jin Tian was right and that he understood everything, that he would never bother him again. He said, kneeling in front of the young man, and then our hero stepped on another of his hands with his foot so that he would hear everything he wanted to hear from this bully, and he said that this was not all, because from that day on he would be his six, and the bully had no choice but to agree with brother Jin Tian, saying that from now on he would obey only him. Our hero thought to himself that even though he has the power, but he can't cope alone. He didn't really want to take people like him, an ordinary bully. But if he controlled this bully, he thought that he could benefit him. Looking at the one who was kneeling right in front of him, completely beaten up and agreeing with his every word. Taking Zhen by the hand and walking away, Jin Tian reminded the bully to remember that the young man could always find him wherever the bully was looking after him. The bully sitting on the grass did not even expect that the young man would break the iron pipe, and even the person ran away leaving him here. The bully alone could not believe that some brat would command him and said that the young man was dreaming very much. The bully thought to himself that if he did not can defeat him one-on-one, he will start a dirty game, and smiling, he was plotting something new against our hero. Zhen, walking with our hero next to her, asked if the young man needed to get in touch with such people. Was it so necessary? To which our hero, walking next to the girl, said that of course it wasn't so. He just didn't have time for people like him. He just said it, told the girl, and when she heard him, she looked only at the young man attentively, listening to everything the young man said. Paying attention to Zhen's cut. Looking at her, our hero understood that he did not know how he would explain what happened to her to the police and thought that suddenly they would take her away for experiments and torture her. To which the girl, seeing the look of the young man who fell directly on her previously wounded chest, asked what is the young man looking at and embarrassingly asked him about it, looking at Jin Tian, who was standing right in front of her. The young man, turning away and embarrassed, said that the girl misunderstood everything and walked away. The girl asked him to stop and stretching out her hand to them said that she just wanted to know about this injury. At that moment she was unbuttoning her blouse and taking it off, said that it was what kind of pill it was, which the young man gave her. How can there be such a medicine in the world at all? Because she didn't even have a trace of the wound left. She shyly showed Jin Tian, who, also embarrassed, could not look calmly at the girl. Then, turning away, the young man asked if she thought that he could hurt her, and she, pulling off her blouse, said that she did not think about it at all. She believed that the young man would never hurt her and was embarrassed to talk about it. Then turning to her, the young man asked if the girl trusted him. Jin Tian said that now he could not tell everything, but she had to understand that now he was not the same as he was before, and looking at him Zhen asked if the young man had changed. He waved his hand after her, said that it was so, and covering the sun with his hand, he said that now he won't give up. He's going to take responsibility for his life. Zhen, looking at the guy, thought that he had finally come out of the shadows and thought to herself that her aunt could relax thinking about his mother. The girl said to herself, grabbing our hero by the hand and walking forward with him. She said that she would not ask him. She believed the young man and would wait for the day when he would tell her everything himself, and smiled at our hero. Jin Tian, too, taking her hand, walked along with her arm and looked at the girl in embarrassment. And then he decided to ask the girl what it meant, and why she was still holding his hand. Our hero asked her in embarrassment, to which Zhen asked her not to make her laugh, because when they go to school, they could. And then she interrupted herself and said that she had to speed up. Holding the young man's hand and smiling at him, she walked ahead. The sun was looking at them, and the guys were holding hands and so on. Zhen told the young man that now they were best friends. Hearing this, the young man smiled and holding the girl's hand was happy that everything ended like this. When Jin Tian came to school, he was completely exhausted. There were bruises under his eyes, and passing into the classroom, the very young man whom our hero saved a long time ago, and who helped him do his homework, greeted him. That guy greeted him and our hero went on without answering anything. To which the young man asked, is it really a guy? I didn't sleep at all last night. To which the young man said that he came home very late yesterday, looking at a friend who was sitting in front of him at his desk. Jin Tian thought to himself that yesterday he spent all his points, So he read history books all night to get new points for himself, and passing to his seat, the young man who was sitting next to him asked if our hero could work today, because summer holidays are in 2 weeks and final exams they were also approaching. Our hero sat down at his desk and listened to his friend, who told him about his worries. Fabian, despite the fact that our hero came to school with, realized that it looked like Lycan's plan had failed yesterday, and he could not allow the young man to continue, and Fabian thought about it to himself, and of course he was upset that his plans were not destined to come true now. So he thought about how it was necessary to deal with the young man as quickly as possible. Jin Tian, addressing his friend, understood that the final exams were already in 2 weeks, and then he realized to himself that he needed to refresh his knowledge. At that moment someone interrupted his thoughts, hitting his desk with his hand. Turning around, the young man saw that it was Fabian, who was coming right up to him, and the one addressing him dared to argue with him. Our hero just looked at the guy who came up to him. For all this, Jen watched, and when she saw Fabian, she did not understand what he was up to again. Then Fabian said that if he got a high score on the final exam, then the young man would no longer approach Jen, and if less, he would never speak to the girl again, and that if Jin Tian was really a man, then it was necessary to compete honestly. Everyone, looking at this, understood that it was a duel for the head of the class, and that everyone was jealous of the girl because both handsome guys were fighting for her attention. Everyone watched as Fabian approached the young man and delivered this ultimatum, because Fabian was one of the top 5 students in the school, and he shamelessly argued with Jin Tian whether it was so. Everyone thought. At that moment Jen, hearing this, was very confused. Our hero just sat there at first without saying anything. His friend, who had saved him before, came up to him and told the guy not to agree to this, because Fabian was trying to provoke Jin Tian, and asked if he had forgotten that the young man had entered the top 5 of the school. Jin Tian thought that he would cope with Fabian and agreed with his argument, to which his friend thought that the young man was crazy. Would he really compete with this Fabian? Everyone in the class also watching this could not understand. Could Jin Tian have already said goodbye to their school flower once and for all? After all, Jen was considered the #1 beauty at school, and was called the school flower. Approaching Jin Tian, Jen asked if the young man really wanted to argue with Fabian. He only asked the girl not to worry when closing his briefcase, because he would win, and besides, addressing the girl, the young man said that the girl was not a thing, as in Fabian uses her as when arguing with him. On that, the young man wanted to destroy this Fabian and show him who was right here. Then Jen said that from now on she would study with the young man, and hearing this, our hero was very surprised. Jen asked her to underestimate because Fabian was in the top 5, but she was in the top 3, and therefore she wanted to help our hero so that he could definitely win the dispute in which they would compete for the title of the best student. And for her heart, Jen only stared in surprise at the girl who was standing next to him. At that moment, Fabian, as always, watched the class from behind the mirror and thought to himself that the girl would really teach him, and he understood that he wanted to show that if the girl continued to help such a loser until death, then he would still remain a loser. Fabian was leaving the classroom, and at that moment he was calling on the phone, addressing Uncle Lee, and walking down the school corridor saying that it was Fabian, and that he needed his help with something, addressing Uncle. To which Uncle, standing in the middle of a posh office and talking to his nephews, said that he wants to get the questions of this final exam. Was it really so? And turning to Fabian, he said that his father was in a special position. If he found out about it, Fabian would have problems. To which Fabian said that it was not for him and asked his uncle not to worry about it. Fabian said that these questions would lie at home with one loser whom he wanted to frame. Thinking to himself, Fabian thought that he had made a brilliant plan and that he could frame our hero, and at the same time get away with it, winning the argument and getting Jen. The library of secondary school number 4 King is a gorgeous building that had stained glass windows, where the students of this school studied, and our heroes were also sitting there when Jen explained to Jin Tian how to solve what he had in his notebook, and said that in fact the solution to this issue was quite simple, showing the young man how it was solved. Looking at the decision in front of him, the young man could not understand whether Jen was joking or not. Then the girl said, covering her face with her hands, that if the young man could not solve it, then he could not even think about the victory he had talked about earlier so confidently. But the hero decided that he would not give up, and sitting on the notebook said that he would solve it. He just needed a little more time. Chewing the pen, thought our hero, looking at the notebook right in front of him. Then a watch appeared in front of our hero, telling the owner that maybe this watch could help him in some way, to which, turning to the clock, the young man asked if he had completely forgotten that he could exchange his glasses for something that could increase his intelligence. Our hero said, and then the clock said that of course, but perhaps now the young man will not be able to use it. because the young man spent 10 points. He had only 11 left, and at that moment the system showed our hero a smart lipstick and intelligence +2. The young man, looking at this, understood that the increase in intelligence was +2 for 10 points. With such prices, all his points accumulated last night would be used. He thought and then realized that first he would increase his intelligence, and taking the lipstick thought whether it was right or not, and looking at the lipstick that was in his hands, the young man did not understand how to use it. Then turning to the owner, the watch said that in order to use smart lipstick he needed to apply it to his lips. The young man sat and looked at the screen in front of him holding a lipstick in his hands. The next moment, Jen, who was standing near the shelves and looking for a book, asked Jin Tian if he had a clear idea of how to solve it. The young man, turning to her, said that he did not understand how to do it at all. The young man was very embarrassed that he could not solve these equations in any way. Jen, putting the books back, said that she knew this, that the young man was playing again and he didn't care at all about this competition. And she was taking care of him here and was very angry with the young man. Then getting up from her desk and grabbing the girl by the hand, our hero said that he really was I don't care. Jen, looking at the young man, saw that Jin Tian was doing something very unusual, and at that moment our hero was painting his lips. Seeing this, the girl was very surprised to see what the young man was doing, and then our hero felt his strength after he painted his lips with this magic lipstick. And Jen said that the answer to question number 2 was like this, and when the girl looked at the young man, she did not understand at all how he found out this answer to the question standing next to the desk on which the notebook was lying, and the young man sitting down at the desk said that it was a very simple equation. Looking at the notebook that was in front of him and taking a pen, our hero began to write. The young man understood that she was right. Now he understood how to solve everything thanks to the lipstick that our hero was wearing, and looking at the notebook, the young man understood how it was all solved. Looking in front of him, he wrote his decisions very quickly. Seeing this, Jen was surprised. Looking at the young man, the girl could not believe. The young man applied lipstick to show his determination and thought that the young man was ready to do something like that to change himself, and she would have done him a disservice if she had not done everything to help him. Then sitting down at the desk, Jen said that if Jin Tian was willing to motivate everything in this way, then she would do everything possible to help him, and told a friend that she did not think he had such a courageous trait. Our hero, looking at the girl above him, did not understand at all what she was talking about. But perhaps she was confused by the fact that the young man had lipstick on his lips, but he just continued to look at his notebook and write in surprise, looking at the girl at the same time. A few days later, the father was cleaning up in his restaurant, thinking that his son had been studying very hard lately, and finally it dawned on him that studying was a very important moment. At that moment, Uncle Fabian was sitting in the restaurant with our hero's father and thinking to himself that this was a great opportunity. The owner was distracted, did not pay attention to him, and then the man left the envelope on the table and left. Then looking in different directions, the father did not understand where this man had gone. Taking the envelope left by the man who had previously eaten in the institution, the father cleaned it, and he was filming the young man's father from around the corner, hoping that the father would pick up this envelope. In the end, he did not specifically pay for the food, and with this video, even if the young man's father throws it away, he will still be involved in the investigation. And the father of our hero, taking the envelope, thought that someone had left it here, but thought that sooner or later some guest would return for what he had left. Night came and our hero was walking home, smiling, thinking that today he had scored points very well. The young man was happy and returning, thinking about what his current statistics were. So turning to the computer, to which he showed him the abilities of Jin Tian. And looking in front of him, the young man thought interestingly, after buying an item, will he be able to buy it again, or will the random system generate another one after using lipstick, which increases the effect by +2? His other stats have also grown. The young man looking in front of him wondered what was the use of this luck. At that moment his father came and asked his son if he was hungry, bringing him food. At that moment our hero saw the envelope and asked what it was, to which the father said that he did not know, it was left by a visitor. I thought that the visitor would return. But Jin Tian's father waited until the evening and the visitor never returned for his thing. The young man looked at the carpet and realized that he had a bad feeling about this, and then our hero's father answered his son so that he would not open other people's things. And the young man looked into the envelope and realized that there was such a thing in front of him, and his father also decided to ask what it was that our hero was holding tickets for the final exams of secondary schools, and said that someone tried to set him up by slipping him these tickets holding an envelope in his hands, which had previously been lying on the table. Our hero said, addressing his father. Looking at the young man, he did not understand what they needed to do then. Maybe they just needed to throw out this envelope, and the father spoke to his son, To which the young man said that it was useless if a person left them on purpose. It can only mean one thing, that he has a plan in case if they throw out this envelope, and told his father that he didn't have to worry, because the young man had a plan that would help him cope with this, taking the envelope, leaving for his room, our hero said. Then, holding the tickets in his hand, the young man thought to himself that since he had tickets, it would be stupid to throw them away without studying them. And the young man thought to himself about Jin Tian, who tried to help him, and then realized that if he read them now it would be unfair to everyone, and he would also give the girl, because she helped him in closing the envelope. The young man understood that Fabian had to prepare for defeat. Jin Tian thought that he would win on his own, and hid the envelope in his jacket and said that he had gone for a walk and that he would return soon, addressing his father. The father, looking at his son, who was about to leave the house, said that it was too late to go for a walk on the street and was worried about his child. Fabian's house. It was a large mansion in which the windows were burning, and being near the mansion, our hero looked directly at him from behind a tree and thought to himself that this was the same house of the son of the Minister of Education, and thought that he needed to find evidence that the young man was involved in the transfer of tickets, and if Jin Tian has dirt, he won't dare to speak against him. The young man thought about Fabian. While he was thinking about it all, our hero heard that someone was approaching, and looking at this tree, the young man saw a car that drove right up to the house. When Fabian got out of the car and opened the door, he asked the driver, hoping that the one who was sitting in the car did what Fabian asked him to do at that moment. The same man who was earlier in the restaurant of our hero's father, so that Fabian would not worry, because everything was ready. He has a photo and that he didn't leave any traces, said the man who was sitting right in front of him. It was Mr. Lee. Fabian rejoiced and said that this lazy man, he thought that his goal was to achieve better results than him. But the young man did not even suspect what he was really up to. Fabian said Mr. Lee was sitting right next to him and listening to the young man. The young man said that his plan was scarier than some kind of test. For what, looking at our young man from the car, he said that he would lose if Jin Tian had tickets. After hearing this, Fabian did not understand how he could lose. But then he said that even if it was so, but the guy was expelled for cheating, and when Jin Tian finally noticed him, the young man said. The next moment Fabian turned around and walked away from the car, saying that even if he won, Jin Tian would not pay attention to him while Jin Tian was at school. And standing in front of the gate, Fabian was going to go into the house while Lai was waiting for him in the car. Watching the whole scene, Jin Tian understood that he needed to start a plan. Watching Fabian, who entered the gate and walked to his house, our hero crept closer and closer and was already standing behind the fence post of Fabian's house, and said that if the young man wanted to get rid of him, then Jin Tian would get rid of his family. While Fabian was walking to the house, he tossed the flash drive that was in his hands and said that Jin Tian, even if he threw away the test that was slipped to him, it would not save him, because all the materials were right on the map that Fabian had in his hands. On the map that Fabian tossed into the air, on this map there was proof that Jin Tian had left the exam papers at home. Looking at this, our hero understood that most likely the young man had a backup copy, and taking the flash drive out of his hands was, of course, a deliberately failed action. So Fabian was about to go home, and our hero, watching him from behind the fence, began to act, taking out his phone and thinking that now it was his turn to take revenge. Filming the young man on the camera, the watch turned to the owner and asked him to pay attention to the fact that in this situation the young man's phone was able to record only silhouettes. To which, addressing the guy once again, the clock 10 said that the young man could exchange 2 points, then the watch would do it for him and record the video in normal quality. Upon hearing this, our hero immediately agreed, because this idea seemed tempting to him, so he would get the video as. The next moment, a small camera that flew to our hero began to talk about our hero not to worry. The recording will be started after the exchange of points. In addition, the young man will receive an additional feature, invisibility. After hearing this, the young man began to spin and looking at himself thought that this feature was very cool. And disappearing, the young man thought that it was really great. Now the young man could follow Fabian and remove everything he needed. Entering the luxurious house and looking at the people in the living room in front of him, Fabian said that he was back. The house looked really luxurious. There was beautiful white leather furniture everywhere, and tables, candlesticks and paintings hanging on the walls, as well as an expensive interior in general, which was in front of the young man. At this moment his father and mother were sitting waiting for Fabian when he returned home. Looking at the father in front of him, who was sitting right on a luxurious sofa and with his arms crossed looking at his son, and he was unhappy, saying that the young man knelt near the wall, and the father was quite serious. Seeing this, Fabian was a little embarrassed, because he did not understand what happened to his father after all. He didn't do anything wrong, the young man said, addressing him directly. The next moment, an argument started between his son and his father, because the father, jumping up from his seat, said that he knew that Fabian had asked Tigo to give him control tickets and asked how his son could do this to him, pointing his finger at the young man and shouting at the whole house, asking how the young man could even ask Lee about it. Then Fabian decided that it was necessary to calm his enraged father, and sitting down on the sofa next to him said that the young man himself did not see them and that he did it for a classmate, telling his father about this situation. The father, standing next to him, looking at his son, tried to understand what he was talking about. At this moment, our hero, too, I was already in the house and watched the whole situation, wanting to find out more information. Of course, no one saw the young man because he was invisible, because the power that gave him a piece of 10 helped the young man hide from the eyes of other people. Watching the whole picture in his mind, Jin Tian thought about what was really wrong with Fabian's father and carefully watching him. The next moment, Fabian's father said that even if it was not for Fabian himself, the young man did not dare to do so, and the enraged father hit Fabian in the face, giving the young man a slap in the face, which he did not expect at all. The father was really angry and Fabian noticed it, because it happened once with him. Jin Tian saw this slap and thought that it was very good and liked it to himself. Fabian, after the slap, looking at his father and rubbing his sore cheek, which was burning, asked how he dared to hit him. The young man was also already beside himself with anger after what his father had done, to which he said that he not only hit the young man, but also disqualified him from exams. Grabbing his father by the breasts, he picked Fabian up from his seat and told him about all this, wanting to better convey this information to the young man. Hearing this, the distraught Fabian said that wasn't his father paid for being so strict and decent, but in fact, Fabian said that he knew everything about how high-ranking people come to his father for good grades for their offspring, and looking into his father's face, the young man said it without shame. The next moment, when the father realized what his son had said to him, he was completely amazed by his words and, without hesitating about his actions, punched the young man right in the face, which Fabian, of course, also did not expect such an action in his direction, and it was very painful for him. The blow was so strong that the young man fell straight down in front of his father, and his cheek was burning red and sore. Lying on the floor in front of his father, Fabiano had no choice but to listen to his father, who said that even if it was all the way Fabian had said earlier about high-ranking people, then it was all for the good of Fabian himself. His father shouted, rubbing his hand, because he hit the young man very hard, and my fist was also hurting at that moment. My father was screaming and looking down at the guy, and he was just lying on the floor and couldn't say anything to his father. The next moment, the mother ran up to them and trying to grab the father and hugging him. She calmed Fetty and said that the young man was his son. Did the father really want to kill the guy? Because he was still climbing with his fists on the young man who was lying on the floor and trying to move away from his father, who apparently went mad from what he said. He's Fabian. The mother, trying to calm her father and looking at Fabiano, said that they should have finished everything and asked the young man to go to his room as soon as possible. Hugging his father, Fabian's mother said. The upset and angry young man, getting up from the floor, did not answer anything, just looked at his parents with a grunt. At that moment, the mother calmed the father and told Fetty to calm down, because after all, the young man was their son. The mother said about Fabian standing next to his father and trying to reason with him, holding his hand. Fetty, looking at his wife, who tried to calm him down, said that it was all she spoiled him and pointed at her with her finger. At this moment, Fabian tried to leave this nightmare as soon as possible to his room, climbing the stairs and leaving his parents alone in the living room. Our hero followed Fabian on his heels, because he knew nothing in this house. He had no choice but to follow Fabian, which is why he actually came. Climbing the stairs, our hero, looking at the picture that unfolded in front of him, thought that like a father, like a son. If the father takes bribes, then the son will do dirty tricks. Did he justify himself by saying that all this was for the family? But our hero believed that Fabian's father, he was a piece of garbage that tries to seem right. Our hero concluded, based on the situation, and continued to follow the young man who was going to the second floor. Going into his room, the young man did not change his clothes and did not even decide to wipe his wound, but sat down at the table thinking that Jin Tian was to blame for everything and banging his fists on the table. The young man tried to figure out what he needed to do next, but he had no idea that our hero was watching him, who stood and looked at Fabian from behind. Jin Tian thought to himself about whether the young man was making fun of him, because he himself proposed the dispute that was now being discussed. Thought to himself, what a stupid guy, looking at Fabian right in front of him. Fabian, closing the desk drawer and putting the flash drive there, thought that a little more and then he would deal with Jin Tian. jumping up from his seat and talking enthusiastically to Fabian, realizing that now he had a chance to deal with the young man. Fabian, being in his room, thought that now he could not sleep, and unbuttoning his shirt, he thought that he needed to go to Kin, let off his steam, and then the young man, leaving the room, wanted to open the doors, but our hero, standing next to him, thought that this child had an excellent nightlife, and he asked Clock 10 if he could put a camera on him, whispering to him right above the hologram, because the young man thought that Fabian could hear him and tried to speak as quietly as possible while in his room. Fabian already wanted to open the door at this moment. Cloak number 1 agreed with our hero and let a ray of energy into Fabian, and followed right behind him. At this moment, our hero, pushing the drawer in the table, thought that first he had to pick up something that could compromise him, namely the flash drive on which the material was with his father, who was holding an envelope of understandable content in his hands. And also the young man hid it in his jacket when he was leaving his house, the same envelope that his father gave him, and which in turn was given to him by Mr. Lee, who worked for Fabian. And the young man, taking it out of his pocket, put this envelope directly into his opponent's drawer, thinking that he was looking forward to the day when the young man would open this drawer. And then a piece of 10 reported that the owner was very cunning, watching his actions while the young man was putting that very envelope in the cherished drawer in Fabian's desk. After removing the envelope, the young man turned around and thought about what was curious, not noticing at all how he touched the vase that was standing right on the table. And then seeing this, the young man did not have time to react, and the vase was already falling to the floor, and the guy realized that it was not good. Watching her fall, the next moment the vase was already lying on the floor and it was split. Then hearing this, everyone who was on the first floor, including Fabian and his parents, looked up at the top, not understanding who was in Fabian's room. The young man understood that it was necessary to come up and look, because really someone was in his room. So putting off his business and everything in the world, Fabian was going to go up to his room and going up the stairs. The young man thought to himself that who could it be? How could he get there? There was Jin Tian, Fabian thought to himself as he walked up the stairs. Our hero, hiding in the room, thought that someone was approaching. At this moment the system informed the young man not to worry, because Fabian would not be able to see him. The computer told our hero. The young man, looking at the system in front of him, said that it wasn't that Fabian would see him, but that it would make him wary. As soon as he opened the box, all Jin Tian's plans would collapse, he thought, and told the computer about it. At that moment Fabian burst into the room, asking who was in his chambers, and looking in front of him, the young man saw a cat licking his paw right in front of a pot with a plant that was already split and lying on the floor. The cat was just licking his lips and looking at the young man who was standing in front of him, not realizing that he wanted it from him. The next moment, Fabian, ignoring the broken flower and the earth that lay all over the floor, took the cat by the scruff of the neck and tried to remove him from his room and threw the cat right out the window, saying that he should get out of here. Closing the window, the guy thought that he thought it was Jin Tian who came to his house, but then shaking his head Fabian realized that it was impossible, because there are cameras in his house at this moment. While Fabian with an intelligent face was thinking about Jin Tian, he only made faces at him, thinking about himself, about how the young man was not a fool, because he was standing right in front of him showing him all sorts of things, tongue out of mouth, and making all sorts of grimaces. The next moment, when Fabian was about to leave and was closing the handle to his room, our hero exhales, thinking that he finally got through it. But he did not expect that a stray cat would jump in at the most dangerous moment. Rubbing his forehead and thinking about it, Jin Tian told everyone about himself. Then the computer, appearing in time in front of the young man, told him that it was because of the increase in the luck parameter. After hearing about the luck parameters, the young man decided to ask again what he meant. Then the computer appears in front of our hero and showing him a sign with his data said that human luck is the most unique of all values, and it was quite possible that with the necessary amount of luck the young man would be able to survive in a deadly situation. At that moment the icon was near the point of luck which numbered force 4. Our hero stood near Fabian's house and thought about his summary, where his characteristics were shown, and there he was attracted by the value of luck. Somehow he would need to increase each of these values. Our hero thought, standing in the darkness in front of Fabian's house, and thought about his values, and especially about the meaning and abilities that before until now they have not been used, that is, about superpowers or special abilities that each person had, as Clock 10 said earlier. After all, next to the abilities was the number 0, and this young man was stressed from the very beginning. Looking at the cat who was walking next to him and who had previously helped our hero get out of an unpleasant situation when he accidentally dropped a vase in Fabian's room. The young man thought, who was this cat, and looked. At that moment the cat was walking right next to him, walking with the young man step by step, which was impossible not to pay attention to her. Then the young man decided to thank the cat and crouched down on his knees. Looking at the animal, thanked her with a slightly embarrassed face, because the young man understood that he was thanking the cat. The cat, who had been going about her business before, saw our hero quickly climbed up a tree and began to meow at him. The young man realized that he had scared the cat very much, that he even jumped from his seat, straight into the tree and waving his hand to the cat. The young man thought to himself that most likely he scared her, so he had no choice but to leave. And then looking after him, the cat, sitting on a tree, thought to himself that maybe this guy was also a medium, since he realized that the cat was not so simple. He thought to himself, and the cat's glowing eyes were watching our hero. The cat thought to himself that he would need to talk to the young man somehow. King High School Campus Number 4. The day after the events where our hero tried to fulfill his plan. All the students gathered at school, and today they had not just a final exam, it was citywide, the leader, and they would take places in the ranking of the city. The teacher said and hoped that the guys would not disgrace the school, so of course they all wanted to compete with each other for the best results. Someone just wanted to pass this exam and the students were ready for anything. At this moment, our hero was looking at the book while everyone else was trying to relax. And how do you inspire yourself for good grades? Then Fabian, watching our hero, thought that he was sure that the young man had read the tickets that he had slipped him, but understood that unfortunately this would be his last exam in his life, he thought to himself, while our hero completely ignored him and was busy with his own affairs. The next moment, everyone was already walking down the corridor of the school exam, and our hero, who was walking along with all the other students, was inspired and holding his hand in his fist. The young man thought that he would finally be able to find out the results of his week-long training, because he tried very hard together with Jin Tian, who supported the young man. And at that moment, Jin Tian called out to him, and turning around, the young man saw a girl who smiled at him and wished him good luck, waving her hand to the young man. Turning to Jin Tian, the young man listened to what she wanted to say to him, and then the girl, a little embarrassed, said that the young man would not give up. Whether she would have something wrong, she was always ready to help him, she said before the exam, and the young man, hearing it, was ready for the exam that was waiting for him, because he was trained and his support was the beauty of the school. So our hero, inspired, just smiled and went straight to the exam. The sun was shining outside and the weather was fine. At that moment, all the students who had previously gathered for the exam and came to the classroom to take it understood that the time was up and the exam was over. Leaving the classroom, our hero thought that this exam did not seem very difficult to him, but he could not pretend as if he knew the answers. Our hero thought to himself as he walked out of the crowd of students who crowded into the schoolyard and discussed the past exam. The young man, bypassing everyone, went to the exit, and then suddenly he was caught by Jin Tian and the guy he had previously saved from hooligans, then courting our hero from both sides. The young man asked how the hero did it, because now he felt that the young man was safe, and Jin Tian, walking next to him, said that there was a pretty good feeling about this exam, and they all left school together. The young man looked at his friend, who said that he felt safe every time, and our hero thought about himself that this happened every test. The young man was told that he was safe, so the hooligans could not get behind him in any way. At this moment, the young man was rubbing his nose, because he understood that someone out there is thinking about him or discussing him behind his back. So they walked and discussed what happened at the exam and what were the difficult or uncomplicated options and tasks. Our hero, looking at his friend with glasses, of course, was a little confused by the fact that he was so careless. At this moment, when the heroes came out to meet them, Fabian came out and, addressing Jin Tian, the young man, he held the phone in his hand and asked if it was ready. The next moment, when our heroes stood up and looked directly at Fabian, he called on the phone and said that he would like to report Jin Tian, namely a second-year student of King High School, for stealing tickets for the Inter-City Unified exam, and the young man demanded that they immediately investigate. He said when he heard this, Jin's friends Chan stood rooted to the spot and stood shocked, looking at what was happening right in front of them, listening to what Fabian was saying on the phone. Our heroes stood and silently listened to everything that was happening right in front of him. After all, he already knew all this and it was not a surprise for him. Friends hearing the phone conversation started rushing straight at Fabian, and Jin Tian started first, saying that Fabian was lying. The girl was very surprised and upset by this fact, and our hero's friend said that Jin Tian would never do that and tried to calm Fabian, who had already reported it. Our hero stood silently and continued to observe the situation. At that moment, the police came and then they asked all the students to disperse so that they could go to the violator. Seeing all this, they dispersed. Fabian, coming up to our guy, said that the young man had no witnesses. He was the only one who knew whether the young man did it or not. Fabian said with his malicious grin, because he thought he had defeated the guy. To which our hero stood silently and looked at him and then told the young man that he was really the only one. Who knows, because he had been waiting for this day for a long time. Jin Tian said, looking at Fabian. Our hero's friends did not understand what was happening at all and also stared at the young man who stood right in front of them and was so confident of his victory, because they could not understand what these two were talking about. At that moment, a fuss had already gathered in the schoolyard and everyone crowded around, looking at the situation that was happening. Everyone was wondering what happened between Fabian and Jin Tian. Why Fabian said that Jin Tian had a long-distance exam and wanted to see what it would lead to. Then the police came and decided to deal with this incident. At that moment, our heroes were standing in the center of the square, and the police approached them, telling the young man to go with them to King High School. They were informed that the young man stole the exam papers. Those and Fabian were standing behind them and grinning maliciously, thinking to himself that it finally happened. Now he wanted to see how the young man would be expelled and wanted to see his reaction, because he would not be able to do anything about it. Fabian was jubilant in his soul, but he could not show it to the full, because there were a lot of people standing around. Jin Tian just stood silently. At this moment Jen said that the police could not take him away, and his friend also said that everyone needed proof that Jin Tian really did it, to which the police did not understand at all why they were protecting him. But the next moment Jin Tian asked the guys to calm down, pointing his finger at Fabian, who was standing in the middle of the police. Jin Tian said that he also wanted to report the theft and slander of a classmate, because this Fabian stole tickets, and pointing at him with his finger, everyone began to pay attention to Fabian, who was standing not far from our heroes. The young man was shocked by what our hero said and spoke, pointing his finger at the one, asking how the young man dared to accuse him, because he was not such a bad person as our hero, and was completely upset that the young man accused him. At that moment, the head of the assessment team, Hu Sheikai, appeared and said that the police, namely the guards, should not listen to Jin Tian, because Fabian was one of their best students. He would never do such a thing, he said as he walked into the center of events right into the square. The head of the evaluation team said that only such a useless student as Jin Tian could do something like that. At that moment one of the hooligans was following him and the guards could not understand what they needed to do. The next moment they already took the young man and said that if the impartial Mr. Hu himself says such a thing, it must have really been Jin Tian's fault, they said, and tried to escort the young man with them. At this moment, Lai, who was standing behind his uncle, said that he was the best, because even his cousin could not cope with Jin Tian and only the leader Hu Sheikai could do what he had just done. He stood next to him and adjusted his glasses and said that the young man was still too young to its right to negotiate with people, so he did it for him. The managers looked at Fabian and thought to themselves that the son of the director fairy had done him a favor, and now he was one step closer to promotion. Both of them were smiling, looking at each other, and then at this moment our hero, standing under the close supervision of the guards who held him so that the young man just in case did not run away, he began his speech. Jin Tian said that everyone had finally gathered here and therefore it was possible to start the performance. The guards were completely surprised what the young man wanted to do and therefore tightened their grip on his hands. But the next moment our hero said that he had proof and he asked him to let him meet with the director, holding a flash drive in his hands. The young man said this to everyone present. Fabian, looking at the young man who had a flash drive in his hand, realized that it was the same flash drive that he had previously kept in his desk and could not understand how this thing ended up here. So the young man was shocked and could not hide his horror. The head of Hu, looking at the young man, understood that Fabian had panic in his eyes. There was definitely something on this card and he understood that he was the only one who should not have allowed Jin Tian to meet with the headmaster. Then he started shouting to the guards to take him away, because the young man is accused of slander at his classmate, and pointing his finger at the young man, he told the guard to do it. When they tried to start taking the young man out, Jen shouted that they needed to see the director, and his friend said that the young man could not be taken away from here, and that all this was unfair. There had to be a fair trial, and at that moment the teacher just arrived, saying that everyone should immediately stop it. It was the head of their class, Chen. She arrived just in time and said that if Jin Tian had proof, he had every right to meet with the director. And if Fabian was innocent, then the guards would be able to arrest Jin Tian anytime. And after seeing Teacher Chen, our hero understood that now luck was on his side, because the teacher was another person who was able to protect him. Then the guards, hearing this from the teacher, at first wanted to object, but then there was nothing left for them, and so they said that Mr. Hu gave such an order, pointing to the head next to him. So they all stood in the middle of the square and tried to figure out what the guards were supposed to do next, and the head said that Teacher Chen, who came here, had to listen to his advice because she, as a trainee, would stay away from this, otherwise she would be fired, he said. After hearing this, Miss Chen was surprised. The girl thought to herself that Hyun Chen really wanted to become a teacher in order to change and join the system. She wanted to be safe, but she understood more that she was not going to compromise. She was not going to be a teacher. And the young man was one of those children who stand up for defenseless classmates and thought about that Jin Tian was definitely not a bad kid. So she decided that she had to protect the young man, because earlier she could not do this when he needed her and was able to protect Miss Chen. Then the teacher coming out in front of the young man and putting her hand to her chest and saying that she was responsible for her students. If the young man was guilty of stealing tickets, then she resigns of her own accord. Hearing this, our hero was touched that the teacher stood up for him, and the head understood that the girl did not listen to him and did his own choice. He had nothing else to say but to agree to what was happening. The next moment, Chen took Jin Tian by the hand and told him to go ahead, because they had to meet with the director and go to his office so that our hero could provide the necessary evidence that he was innocent. His friends were greatly surprised and they could only observe this situation. The next moment, the guards said that it was necessary to go with them, because when teacher Chen left, they could only follow her. There was nothing else for them to do. At that moment, his nephew Lai Kang and Fabian stood behind the leader, who arranged all this, and both of them were silent and said nothing. Fabian, shocked to horror, understood that this was the end, because his plan crumbled into small pieces. The young man had proof, which means that he will not be able to get away with it, and perhaps Jin Tian will win. Then Fabian can be suspended from school, and even his acquaintance will not solve anything. Everyone left the square in front of the school and went to the school itself, and Jin Tian walked in front, followed by the guards and Fabian, along with Lai and his uncle, because they had nothing else to do but follow the young man and the teacher. So together they found themselves in the director's office, standing in front of the director himself, and at this moment, the moment they had to report what had happened. The director, realizing that something had happened and such a large group of students with teachers was in his office, getting up from his desk, asked what was happening here. Looking at all those gathered, he was very interested in what happened. On what occasion he was disturbed. Then our hero began to speak first, and addressing the director said that he would understand everything when he saw what was on the flash drive that the young man handed to the director. At that moment, Jen and our hero's friends were standing behind the young man, mentally supporting his steps. They knew that our hero was right and he had to prove it, and he could only do it in the director's office. Jin Tian said that Fabian asked his father's subordinate to steal the exam papers and then deliberately left them in his father's institution to frame him. The young man said, looking at Fabian, who could not believe his ears, that the young man really knew everything and was able to say about it, realizing that everything was true and he was now they will not get away from punishment. Then inserting the flash drive into the computer, the director wanted to see what was on this file. And on the file he saw a video where the father of our hero, clearing the table, saw the envelope that was brought to him, and then the director, looking at everything on it, asked where it was. That it turned out that the father of the young man was the one who he took the exam sheets and asked Jin Tian if the young man had not read them for sure. Realizing that the temptation was great and the student who was supposed to take the exam could read the exam tickets, even if he was framed, so he was wondering what the young man would answer. At this moment, our hero is carefully watching the reaction of the director, and looking at him was going to answer. At that moment, Fabian calmed down a little and thought that it was good that this video was recorded in such a dubious way, otherwise he would not have been able to avoid accusations. He thought about himself and about his relatives. Fabian decided to act at that moment. The young man pointed his finger at Jin Tian and said that he knew where the young man took this video, but this was really an attempt to frame him, he said. Seeing the reaction, the young man said that if they were going to play, then it was necessary to play big, since Fabian insisted on it so much. And then our hero, taking out the memory card, asked the director to take this memory card from him, because he probably wanted to see what was on it, and giving the memory card to the director, he was "I'm interested in what was on it." They were all standing in the director's office, and he was holding out his hand to take a flash drive. Then the young man said that this flash drive had information about how Fabian's family was doing business. Fabian watched it all from the side, and then on the laptop screen, where the director stuck a new flash drive, a picture appeared where Fabian was standing in front of his father in their living room. There was a dialogue on the video where the father asks Fabian if he really said to steal the exam sheets, and the father was madly angry at the young man. Then he said that how could his son get high scores? Besides, if a young man can steal the final exam, then a young man can steal the entrance exam. Was it so, he asked his son. The director, watching the picture that unfolded right in front of him, understood that it was Director Fei. Seeing this, the head understood that everything was very bad. Why Jin Tian already had such a video. It was completely unclear to him where the young man could get it from, and he was shocked, because he understood that his career could go derailed after this. Fabian was shocked and shaken so much that he was shaking and could not say anything. Our hero, seeing this, asked if Fabian wanted to say anything else about what happened. Fabian started to speak and turned to Jin Tian. Then he said that the young men did not need to say anything, and all those gathered were also watching closely. The situation was silent, because they were waiting for what would happen next. Our hero, stopping Fabian with his hand and as if asking him to be silent, said that now the facts were in front of them. Fabian stole the exam sheets and substitutes his classmate. Jin Tian said, pointing at the young man, and I addressed the director as he thought what to do. Wasn't he scared of the name of Director Fei? Right, it was our hero who asked. The director, sitting and thinking over the whole situation, said that it was not worth provoking him, since such a thing happened at his school. He would not tolerate it and said that Fabian was expelled. The young man was forbidden to take exams for 3 years. The director announced his verdict. Also, the director, addressing Fabian, said that he would draw up a document tonight and he was going to post the whole story that happened in the document. His ending was the last and irrevocable slapping on the table, said the director, addressing Fabian. Fabian understood that he was in, because the recording would be documented and it was the end, the young man thought. He was shocked at how everything turned out and even fell on the floor in front of the director because he understood that now his future was over, like all his studies, his career, and he only wanted to get rid of our hero. But fate played a cruel joke on him and the young man could not realize it in any way. Everyone turned to Jin Tian and rejoiced for the young man, saying that he was lucky. Zhen Zhen also supported our hero, saying that she knew that Jin Tian would never do anything like this. He just scratched his head with embarrassment and smiled at his friends, knowing that he finally won and dressed from Fabian, which prevented him from living. Teacher Chen was also right about this guy, and approaching the hero, she also congratulated the young man on the fact that he won this battle and was able to prove his innocence to this lie. After that, they all left the director's office and the head just looked in Jin Tian's direction, not thinking that Director Fei would let them in so easily. And Lai was also standing behind his uncle and thinking that this whole situation was not in their favor. Watching the guys that were leaving, we decided to think about what to do next. Who, addressing Fabian, said that everything was fine. It was just a 3-year ban in 3 years with his grades. The young man would still be able to go to college. The head tried to cheer the guy up and tried to lift the young man off the floor, because he was still sitting on the floor shocked by the whole situation and listening to the head. He was only silent at first. Then Fabian, unable to stand it and throwing away the hand that held him, namely the hand of the head. The young man said that he would certainly be able to enroll in 3 years and he should not have told him about it. But that was not the point at all. The head was surprised by the reaction of the young man and how he threw him away a hand and his help. Looking at Fabian, it could be understood that the young man was beside himself with anger. His eyes turned red and his teeth clenched in a grin, and the young man thought to himself that he would kill Jin Tian. Night came, and our hero, along with Teacher Chen, Zhen Zhen and his friend, went to a restaurant to celebrate this event. Sitting at a large table and ordering drinks and food, our heroes talked sweetly and celebrated Jin Tian's victory because it was necessary to celebrate it. The young man was able to defeat the unscrupulous Fabian, and Zhen Zhen offered a toast that everyone agreed, and clinking glasses shouted hurrah. The phone lying on the table near the girl suddenly vibrated and Zhen Zhen asked everyone to be quiet, because her father called her, and taking the phone, the girl answered, asking her father what was new. Then he shouted into the phone and asked the girl if she knew what time it was and why she didn't come home. What she did, and he asked if she wanted it again, to which the girl, after hearing the last question, was very scared and told her father that she would come home right away, and said that she was hanging up the phone. Addressing her father, there was fear on her face, but she tried not to show it to anyone. The next moment Zhen Zhen got up from their table without finishing her food and said that she was very sorry and her father was waiting for her. So the girl had to go, and smiling Zhen Zhen tried to say goodbye to everyone. Our hero held a glass in his hands and looking at the girl that was already leaving was very surprised, and he said that it was also necessary to go home then. Since the girl was leaving, everyone listened attentively to our hero and agreed with him, because the time was already late. Everyone was tired after such a hard day. The next moment, our hero, still holding the same glass in his hand, was asking a lot of questions, and he was worried that the girl, as it seemed to him, was afraid of her father, and at that moment the young man was thinking about what kind of family Zhen Zhen had. because he didn't think he had ever heard so that she would say something about her parents or about the family in general. The young man was worried about it. He understood that he did not know a lot about Jin Tian. From the restaurant, our hero rode a bicycle, because it was already late, and it was not very close to home. And while he was driving through trees and houses, the young man thought that he would like to learn more about Jin Tian. In the end, the girl helped him a lot, and the hero was thinking about it after driving home all the way, and was very focused, because he was worried about the reaction of the girl he saw in the restaurant, because he understood that something was wrong. But the girl didn't want to upset anyone, so she didn't tell anyone anything. While our hero was driving, suddenly he was blinded by the headlights from the car, and closing his eyes, the young man could not figure out who was in front of him, because he did not see the face of the person who was driving, because the headlights of the car blinded him very brightly, and it was very dark outside, and his eyes, of course, were not accustomed to such light. They could see what was in front of them. So our hero had to get off his bike and close his eyes with his hands to understand at least a little what was in front of him. Otherwise he could get into an accident or crash into someone. Fabian was driving the car, and when he saw Jin Tian, the young man who had previously been beside himself with anger, decided that now he would take revenge on Jin Tian. Because for this he was here and sitting in the car. Fabian told himself that he was waiting for him, clutching the steering wheel of his expensive car, which was a gift from his parents, and pressing the gas pedal to full. The young man said that he would kill Jin Tian. It was just the same car that shone its headlights on our hero, and was Fabian's car, as our hero understood, a car that was rushing straight at him. The young man understood that the car was driving straight at him, and therefore, turning to the 10 clock, asked him to give him an exchange as soon as possible, and asked him to spend anything, even all the points, but only so that the clock would go to save our hero from death, which was coming right at him in the form of Fabian's gorgeous car, and his anger which ate the guy from the inside. And then the watch, turning to the master, said that there was no problem. The mechanism was started and the watch was ready to save our hero, activating lightning in the sky and striking directly at Jin Tian, who was standing on the asphalt below, under these very lightning bolts, waiting for salvation from his watch, which he asked for this watch. The next moment, the car that was rushing at Fabian was already very close, and he was screaming in his car for the young man to die. At that moment, lightning electrified right in the body of our hero, and he stopped the car with just 1 foot. Seeing the young man in front of him, Fabian did not understand at all what was happening, because Jin Tian was burning all over with lightning, and was able to stop the car with just 1 foot. And turning to Fabian, who was sitting in the car, Jin Tian asked if the young man wanted to kill him, and if this was really the case, then our hero would not allow him to. So squeezing with his fist in his fist, the young man punched through the glass that was frontal, and reaching Fabian with his hand, grabbed the young man by the breasts, and the next moment pulling him towards himself. Fabian was already flying high and far from the car, landing directly on the asphalt. Landing on the asphalt, after Jin Tian threw the guy out of the car window with just 1 hand. Blood gushed from the young man's nose and mouth, because the blow fell on his head and was too heavy. It was very hard and bad for the young man. Then Jin Tian, standing next to him and leaning on the young man's car, told Cloak 10 that let this guy be an idiot all his life and live like that, he said, and looking at the situation, what was happening right in front of them, they said that the young man owed him, because how Jin fulfilled the wishes of our hero. The mechanism was started up again, and the clock again generated some kind of action using its power on Fabian. The light shone on Fabian, who was lying on the asphalt and trying to do what our hero asked before, namely, to make a fool out of Fabian, and he only looked at the moon that shone on him, lay on the asphalt trying not to look at the light so that he was in front of him. The next moment, the young man, having recovered, was lying on the asphalt and looked at the sky with a bad look. Only the headlights from the car shone on him. She was the hero, taking her bike, was walking away. The young man thought that his supernatural ability was quite strong from the fact that the guy was struck by lightning. His hair was now standing on end and checking his efforts. The young man looked at his hands. At this moment, the number 1 piece that was next to our hero told the master not to exaggerate his capabilities. At that moment, right on the pointers, where all the characteristics of our hero's data were listed next to the abilities, the number 1 appeared, which meant that the young man now had superhuman abilities that he had previously thought about. The next day the sun was shining and the weather was fine, and the school, which was still the same as usual, namely the King's School, where our hero studied, was silent. On this day the results of the final exam were to be announced. It was the most cherished date for all students, because they knew that on this day, the day they receive their results, and will either brag about them or cry, realizing that they will have to go to the summer semester. There were also a lot of people who crowded on the field in front of the school, and they wanted not to think about the fact that today was the date of the announcement of the exam results, that it was a time when they were free and could do anything because the summer holidays were ahead. At this moment, in the school itself, as usual, the bullies were getting the weakest. One of these weak ones was a friend of Jin Tian, who was most offended. Lycan said that he failed the exam because our hero's friend did not let him write off at that moment. They were all standing in the classroom and trying to scare the young man by making claims that they could not write off him on the exam in any way. The young men were surrounded by 3 guys including Lycan. He and nothing he could tell because they were much stronger than him. Jen Jen was standing nearby behind them, feverishly clutching a piece of paper in her hands and watching the whole situation. The next moment, the persons grabbing the young man said that this year the young man would do summer homework for him, addressing the guy and shouting at him, trying to show who was in charge here. Hearing this guy did not understand at all why he had to do it, but being scared, he said that he wanted to confront the person. But with fright he was stronger than him and the young man could not say anything, only looked with frightened eyes at his opponent, because he had nothing else to do. There was no other way to do it, and he was completely alone, and the hooligans took great advantage of this opportunity so that they could deal with this young man, because otherwise he walked with them all the time, which was impossible. Jen Jen, who had been standing aside and holding her piece of paper in her hands, started shouting at Lycan, saying that the young man was not to blame, that the bully did not pass the exam, because he was just trying to intimidate the young man, and could have studied before the exam and then would have passed it calmly. Jen Jen thought to herself, after all, she did not understand at all. And here was a young man whom he was offending, because he could not write an exam for him. It was against the rules and then he could be expelled. Jen Jen, addressing the young man, said that she was thinking about Lai Kang after seeing this game, that today he was just intimidating the guy. What was wrong with that? Asked Jen Jen, and turning to her. Hearing this, she was very surprised and looked only at Lai Kang, who was standing in front of her surrounded by his faithful subjects, and looking at the guy, he expected to see a reaction from him. The young man stood in a circle of these 3 hooligans and one of them stroked the guy on the head, pretending that they were friends. Then turning to the girl, the young man said that everything was fine, because it was just a little summer homework that he was able to do quickly enough, because the young man had good grades and he grasped everything very quickly, and especially the task that he was given needed. The guys all this time standing next to the young man teased him, saying that he was their boy. Then the young man tried to confront Lycan and his friends with a grimace on his face, saying that Jin Tian had to do his homework himself. The next moment, for the face, he asked which of them wanted to interfere in their affairs again, because it was already annoying that everyone interfered in their affairs, and only he always got enough for what he did. At this moment, his friends looked fastidiously at the young man and showed who was the boss here so that he could not resist them. The next moment, suddenly the whole class froze and the faces, along with their friends, turning to the door, saw a man who was approaching them and was already there, so they had no choice but to be shocked and stay in place, because that was all they could do, because they knew that the young man was strong enough and against they won't be able to fight him like before. So the object of ridicule was only the guy they mocked earlier, and they didn't touch Jin Tian, unless he didn't show up in time and didn't save someone like this guy. Our hero, standing behind the hooligans, asked Lycan who would do his homework, as if addressing questions to the young man so that he answered it correctly. And our hero was very surprised with this scenario, because he thought that everything was over with what he said, and Jin Tian, as well as everyone else, obeyed him without trying to detain someone younger or weaker than them. This gang consisted of 3 healthy guys, and those they bullied were usually smaller boys or the same as them, but much weaker. Hearing that the faces he came to class, all 3 hooligans were in shock. They were so scared of the Jing that the body of the face did not shake, and making a scared face, realizing that the young man was already very close to them. There was nothing more the guy could do, saying that he would do everything himself. He would do his homework for the summer that he was asked, and would not to connect anyone to this, trying to prove it to Jin Tian so that it can be resolved as soon as possible. The next moment, Jin Tian, standing in front of the guys, said that everything was fine if he ever saw them bullying someone again. He would break them and break their legs, they said, and the young man, looking at how the guys ran out of the classroom like girls and running away, tried to escape from going to anger, which was just terrible, and so the boys ran out through the main entrance right in the classroom. Jin Tian just stood and stared in front of him, because he understood that now they were afraid of him, even though he didn't do anything special. The hooligans were leaving the classroom, and our hero's friend thanked him for saving him again, because the young man himself was unable to save himself, and therefore he always admired our hero, who came to his aid in time and saved him from these hooligans. Jin Tian was standing next to the young man and looking at the young man. She smiled and was a little embarrassed at the sight of him, because the young man liked the girl very much and the way he treated those who were weaker attracted him very much to this trait of character, and Jin Tian just stood silently and looked at the guy. The next moment, our hero, addressing the young man, said that he was graduating next year and should be strong, because he could not constantly rely on others when Jin Tian was not around. The young man would no longer have anyone to call for help, if anything, or to rely on someone, so he had to finally then try to defend himself in such situations by talking more confidently, and not letting the hooligans provoke him. The young man charged with Jin Tian's energy spoke that he understood everything and looked at our hero in an inspired and determined way. The next moment, our hero, stroking the young man's head, said that he just knew, because they had to go home together tonight, and smiling Jin Tian said this to his friend that he was right in front of him. He wanted to please somehow a guy who completely drooped after the young man told him that he could not rely on others. The next moment, Jin Tian, turning to Jin Tian, asked the girl if she had received a report card and asked how much he scored, because the young man was wondering how much he was able to score in the end for the exam they were preparing together with the girl. So hard and for so long their side was very much, and the girl also put no less more effort than Jin Tian himself. So of course the young man was interested in his results, which he very much wanted to find out by addressing the girl and asking her about it. Then she said that she had received a report card and handed it to the young man, holding it in her hands. This time the young man was a little better, the girl said, turning to Jin Tian, and she was happy that she could help in this achievement, because if it wasn't for her, who would know what could have happened? And so she, standing in the classroom already opposite the young man, she gave him the very cherished piece of paper that she had been holding before while there were bullies in the class who offended our hero's friend. And she just stood in the corner and only watched this situation because she could not do anything more. Taking a piece of paper from Jin Tian's hands, which was given to our hero by a girl, and a young man looked at him very carefully, and then, not finding himself at the end of the list, he realized that he was second in class, seeing his surname at the very top of this list that he had in his hands. Now the young man understood why Jin Tian was so desperately clutching this piece of paper and did not approach the hooligans, so that they would not see that our hero had now also become an obedient boy who studied well, because the young man now really had an interesting study, and Jin Tian was very happy about it. Our hero, inspired, said that it looks like Fabian lost quite thoroughly, because the young man really trained a lot and studied a lot lately, and Fabian was busy only with revenge alone, and therefore the young man concentrated his attention completely in the wrong place, and was able to lose to our hero. So he was also suspended from classes and he was expelled, and considering what happened after everything, he also remained a fool for the rest of his life at the request of our hero that he asked for it from the clock. His friend, looking at the young man from under his glasses, said that Fabian realized that discipline was approaching him, found control papers and evidence of his father's bribery in his house, and Fabian went crazy, he said. But our hero knew that in fact Fabian went crazy not from this, but from their night meetings where our hero was able to show him his real strength. When lightning struck him, the young man stopped the car, and the next moment what he did could help Fabian lose his mind and become a fool. But his friend continued that Fabian's mother came to pray that the young man was expelled from school because it was a great shame for the family, and they did not want to advertise it at this moment. Our hero's friend was adjusting his glasses, a little happy about what situation had happened to Fabian, because the young man always teased and offended him. And now he was overtaken karma, and it was their turn for Jin Tian and all the other classmates to rejoice that they were free to do what they want and live in peace. The next moment, Jin Tian, standing next to her, lowered her head and was very sad, saying that she did not think that anyone could withstand such a blow, remembering the story of the young man who told a little earlier, and she was very sad for the guy, because in some way she understood him and sympathized with him. So Jin Tian didn't have anything left, and so she just accepted the young man's situation and didn't do anything else. So the three of them stood in the classroom and discussed the situation that had developed together with Fabian, after everything that had happened to the three of them. And then our hero sat down at his desk and took a report card saying that those who are fighting for power end up badly. Even if the young man had not gone mad, he lost to our hero, he said, sitting down to his game with a proud look, despite the fact that he was right in front of him. The guys stood and just listened to him, realizing that this was all they could do, because Jin Tian was always right, and especially in such moments. The next moment, Jin Tian, who was standing next to us, a little embarrassed, asked our hero again, asking about what the young man was doing this summer, and then our hero, looking at the girl, said that he had signed up for training and that he wanted to study hard until the end of the year to enroll in a good university. This was his goal, which the young man decided to tell the girl about, because she was his closest friend and he understood that he could trust the girl in telling his goals and what he wanted to achieve. Because Jin Tian helped him a lot in this and helped him realize that the young man really represents something. So he told her about his plans for this life. Jin Tian stood and listened to the young man, and he said that he wanted to make a name for himself and give his father a better life, because he knew that his father had done everything for him that the young man only wanted and was in charge of his small restaurant. So the young man thought that he was obliged to make his father's life much better so that he could don't worry about anything. Then Jin Tian, looking at our hero, who was sitting at the table and kept a report card with him, said that she also went to paid classes and offered our hero to do it together, because that's why she found out what the young man planned to do this summer. She wanted to go to exams with him and therefore offered our hero this is the situation so that the young man was not bored and so that together they could make each other a great company. The sun was shining, the weather was fine outside, and after school our hero went to a beautiful building that stood right in front of him. The building had panoramic windows and it looked very modernized and modern. So everyone was studying there to better motivate people to go to such a place, and approaching the publication the young man thought about that on the first day of the course. He hoped that this would help him accumulate a little more ultra energy classes, he thought to himself. Putting the bike in the parking lot that was near this building and entering the building, the young man got into the classroom after some time. The students were sitting in the audience and listening to the teacher, who said that she was their teacher for the summer training and greeted everyone by getting up from her seat. Then the young man, sitting at his desk, realized that it was no different from the school where he went every day, and he thought that there would be something more interesting at the courses and he would be able to learn something newer and expanded, because the school did not give all the knowledge that was needed for later life, our hero thought. The guy was carefully watching what was happening on the blackboard at this moment. Someone interrupted his discussion by handing the young man a piece of paper and saying that it was to him. After hearing this, the guy could not believe his eyes and then took the piece of paper unfolding, thinking that it was the first day here, and he still did not. I met friends. Was it really a joke? When the young man received a piece of paper and decided to open it, opening wailing, he saw that it was not just a piece of paper. It was a confession, and on this sheet it was written about the fact that Jin Tian liked someone very much, and the young man understood that this entry was from a girl who decided to confess to him. So blushing, our guy did not understand who it was. The young man began to look around and then, embarrassed, putting a piece of paper, he saw a girl who showed him a love icon on her fingers and winked at him. She also whispered something, thinking that our hero would read it on her lips, describing her appearance. The girl had beautiful pink hair, beautiful big eyes, and a wonderful sense of taste. The appearance of the girl was quite expressive, and even our hero could not pass by this, and our hero understood that he did not remember her at all already if they had previously met. Then, sitting at his desk in front of a beautiful panoramic window and enjoying the weather, the young man thought about who beat it and was not at all impressed. There is Cinderella in this classroom. The young man sat with a grimace on his face and tried to figure out who it was, because he didn't like it at all and he only felt his face trying not to attract much attention. And then diving his textbook said that he loves to study. Study loves him, and otherwise all were monsters, said the young man to myself, reading this as a mantra, so as not to be distracted by anything else. And then our hero continued to look at the textbook so that he was right in front of him. At that moment, all the other students were sitting and studying in the same way as our hero. Then the young man realized that this was the very atmosphere in which he wanted to get, and at that moment he was distracted by the clock saying that they turned to the master, that they believed that the young man should contact this girl. Who the young man, and first of all, I didn't like the very girl who sent him a love note. The next moment, the young man talks to the clock in a whisper, bending down to the party, saying that he was already in love with someone and he did not like being in two positions at the same time, hinting to the girl that he would not cheat on his beloved partner. Otherwise it would not be him anymore. The young man told his clock 10. Then the clock answered the young man so that he would not worry about it. He meant that this girl was not simple and asked the guy to check her value. Then the young man immediately turned to the girl and decided that it was necessary to do as the computer said, and so he began his scanning using your eyes. Looking through the whole class at the girl, he realized that he saw intelligence, which was equal to 7, physical strength, which was equal to 9, spirit was equal to 5, luck 3, abilities 2, a cat of the second level, and there was a question over the name. Then the young man, carefully looking at the girl, suddenly remembered another feature of the cat, and realized that perhaps it was the same cat that helped him once in Fabian's house so that the young man would not be noticed, and the same cat that jumped on the tallest trees, frightened of our hero so that the young man would not get her. The sun was still shining outside and the weather was not at all for studying, so the teacher let everyone go and said that that was all for today. All the guys had to come back and study well, so our hero, staying in class with the girl, understood that it would be better if he waited for her outside until collects her briefcase, and noticing this, the girl leaving the classroom saw our hero, who was standing and waiting only for her. The next moment, the girl was leaving the classroom and our hero was waiting for her, asking if they could talk, because he had been waiting for this for a long time. Just like she herself, when she saw the girl leaving the classroom, she was waiting for her because he needed to clarify one point. Then the girl said that they could certainly talk and that she was waiting for him. Leaving with a new acquaintance along the corridor, Jin Tian suddenly saw him, who came to the classroom to see the young man and looking after our hero who was leaving with a new acquaintance. Jin Tian was sad and a little jealous because she asked Jin Tian about herself, who was this girl that was walking next to him and watching at the young man, because the girl easily hugged him by one hand and could easily walk next to him, at the moment when Jin Tian was very embarrassed. The next moment, our hero and the girl came to the residence, where there were large beautiful green lawn trees and a gazebo. It was a place to relax, and when the young man came there, he asked the girl what she wanted. Then she turned to the guy and asked what kind of person the young man was, even if he did not ask her name. While they were walking through the park, the girl said that she fell in love with a young man at first sight. Taking his hand in her hand and blushing, she tried to show him this, to which our hero pulls his hand out of the girl's hands, saying that this was not necessary because they were mediums and there was no need to go where he said he was. Whether this is so, to which the girl said that she would like the young man to join her organization. An experienced guy was right in front of her and she decided to say it straight. Standing next to our hero and turning to him by the arm, the girl said that she was being turned on by King Mao, and that she was a second-level medium and she would come to our hero to join the girl's organization. She said that the young man looked at the sun that shone at the zenith and said that all this was useless. At this moment the girl ran up to our hero said that she would not leave until the young man promised her. Our hero was very much interested in what exactly he had to promise the girl that was standing next to him, and then addressing her, he said in how many countries and organizations he would be if he agreed to any invitation like a girl, and said yes to leave because it was all useless. Then she looked at the young man, completely did not understand that, but he wanted the young man was only jealous. The next moment our hero, kicking some kind of thing, said that he was leaving. The girl tried to stop him, but said the next moment that one day she saved his life. Was the young man really so grateful and embarrassed looking at him? Then our hero, seeing this, asked when this girl was saving him and treating her looked, which she stood in front of him. When the girl said that she would prove to the young man that it really was so, and that she did not take it. So the next moment she used her strength and decided to get acquired from the very cat that our hero scared and who helped him once after the battle. And the cat asked, standing on things that the girl had previously believed with the young man to her or not. The next moment, the young man saw in front of him the cat of the same cat who was standing and asking about it from our hero. The cat was standing on things that were previously put on the girl. And when he saw this, the young man realized that it was the same code, saying out loud that it was him. Our hero was thinking about that he did not know that this cat was a medium, but what this girl needed from him. Our hero wondered to himself, because her at the post office completely confused the young man. The next moment someone was addressing Jin Tian and looking to the side on the lawn. The young man saw his beloved. It was Jin Tian who was running after our young man, and all this time, because she was very jealous of the girl who was walking next to our hero. And seeing Jin Tian, the young man understood that the situation was becoming ticklish and began to worry about the fact that there was a cat in front of him who turned into a girl and ran to the clearing where our hero was. Asked the young man where the girl was with whom she left the courses as a young man. A moment before, the girl managed to turn into the same cat and stood near the foot of the young man watching the girl who came up and tried not to look at our hero, was very shy. Then the next moment, the cat began to cross her legs about the trousers of the young man and asked, meowing, not to talk to this girl. Seeing this, our hero was in a dilemma, because what kind of girl he was talking about? The cat. After all, there was only a cat and he was talking a young man. Then the girl asked what was about the clothes that were lying right in front of the young man's feet, and at his feet was a skirt that the cat girl had previously worn and a blouse. Seeing this, Jen was insanely angry, because she was very jealous of the young man, and seeing that he was lying, she did not understand at all where these things came from, so I decided to point out to the guy that he won't be able to lie. After all, she saw strong evidence that the young man had not left the courses alone earlier, and that there was a girl next to him who was wearing the same clothes that was now lying on the ground. So Jen demanded an answer from the hero. Jen was very nice, jealous of Jin Tian. But for the young man, such behavior was new, and therefore he did not always understand how he needed to communicate with the girl and how to behave in order to be honest.